$500 for a man's life. 1,000 if he's famous enough, 5,000 if he's terrorized a territory. In the Wild West, human hunting became a legitimate profession. The Dunn brothers weren't lawmen, they were cattle thieves who made a deal with a sheriff hiding his own outlaw past. Together, they tracked, betrayed and executed men they once called friends, all for the bounty on their heads. Here's the blood-soaked truth about bounty hunting in the American frontier. Before we start tonight's story, if you use these to fall asleep, that's what they're for, so like or subscribe. Tell me where you're listening from and what time it is. Got comments from Seattle to Stockholm last time. The time zone thing never stops being weird to me. So, we're going back to the Wild West tonight. But before we go anywhere, get cozy. Like, actually cozy. Pillows good? Blanket situation handled? Perfect. Trust me on this one. Your eyes flutter open in a rough-hewn cabin somewhere in Oklahoma territory. The year is 1893. Your back aches from the thin, lumpy mattress beneath you, and the wool blanket scratches against your skin, not like your soft, comfortable bed right now. Outside, the wind whistles through the cracks in the wooden walls. It's still dark, but dawn isn't far off. The air carries the scent of wood smoke, coffee, and gun oil. That last smell is always around these days. Everyone's armed, everyone's dangerous, and everyone's watching their back, including you. You swing your legs over the edge of the bed and wince. Your boots have left a trail of red Oklahoma dust across the floor. You slept with your gun belt on again, third night in a row, but that's what happens when you're hunting human beings for money. You're basically a professional killer with a piece of paper making it legal. Yeah, welcome to the world of the Wild West bounty hunter. It's not what the dime novels make it out to be. It's dirtier, it's bloodier, it's morally murkier than a creek after a cattle drive. Picture this. It's 1892, and the notorious Dalton gang had just met their bloody end in Coffeyville, Kansas. 4 bandits gunned down in the street after trying to rob 2 banks at once. Talk about ambitious. But the gang wasn't just those 5 guys. They had friends, associates, fellow outlaws. And those guys, they scattered like buckshot. The law was stretched thin across territories bigger than some European countries. Marshals couldn't be everywhere. So what did they do? They turned to people who knew the outlaws best. Former friends, former partners, even former criminals themselves. That's how the Dunn brothers got into the bounty hunting business. I spent months researching these guys, and let me tell you, the line between outlaw and lawman was paper thin. Sometimes it didn't exist at all. "You want us to bring in the wild bunch?" B. Dunn probably asked when offered the deal, and the marshals like, "Dead or alive? Preferably dead. Less paperwork." That's not an exaggeration. They literally preferred outlaws dead. Hauling a live prisoner across hundreds of miles of territory was dangerous. A dead body just needed a wagon and some ice if the weather was hot. The Dunn brothers weren't exactly model citizens themselves. Bill, B, Dal, Calvin, and George Dunn ran a boarding house near Ingles and a meat market in Porny, Oklahoma, but they also had a side hustle in cattle rustling. Yeah, criminals hunting criminals. Welcome to the frontier justice system. Their teenaged sister Rose had even fallen in love with one of the outlaws they were now hunting, George Bitter Creek Newcomb of the Wild Bunch. Nothing complicated about that family dinner conversation, but this story really centers around 2 men. Frank Canton, the tough-as-rawhide lawman with a dark secret, and B. Dunn, a bounty hunter who'd make a deal with the devil if there was money in it. Let's back up, though. The Wild West didn't just magically become wild. By the 1890s, the American frontier was actually closing. The government had pushed across the continent in waves, claiming land by purchase, annexation, and removal of indigenous peoples. Oklahoma Territory was this strange patchwork of settlements, reservations, and no man's lands, the perfect place for outlaws to hide, and hide they did. The Wild Bunch, led by Bill Doolin, was terrorizing the region. Train robberies, bank heists, shootouts with lawmen, they were the real deal. The gang had colourful members with equally colourful nicknames. Bitter Creek, Newcomb, Dynamite Dick, Clifton, Tulsa Jack Blake, Redbuck Waitman, and Arkansas Tom Jones. These weren't just handles for fun, they were how people knew them. In a world before photographs were common, your reputation and nickname travelled faster than you did. Now, Frank Canton was something else entirely. As both Undersheriff of Porny County and a Deputy U.S. Marshal, he had authority, but he wasn't exactly what you'd call upstanding. There were whispers about his fondness for the bottle and his brutal methods. He had in recent years worked as a cowboy and a sheriff further west, but his early life was a mystery, or so people thought. Frank, his boss might say, we need the Wild Bunch taken care of. And Canton would just nod, checking his revolver. Dead or alive? The posters say both. Treasury doesn't care which way they come in. The bounties on these outlaws' heads were serious money, $1,000 to $3,000 per man, at a time when a good annual salary might be $500. That's like offering $100,000 per outlaw in today's money. For poor frontier folks, that kind of reward was life-changing. The morning is coming on faster now. You pour yourself coffee that's thick enough to stand a spoon in. The cup warms your hands against the chill. Every bounty hunter has their own method. Some track footprints and broken twigs like indigenous scouts. Others work their connections paying for tips in saloons and brothels. You've got your own method. You know these outlaws. You drank with them once, maybe robbed with them too. Now you're going to bring them in one way or another. Here's the thing about bounty hunting in the Wild West. It wasn't like the movies. Most bounty hunters weren't drifters who rode into town looking at wanted posters. They were lawmen supplementing their income, or locals who knew the criminals personally. The Dunn brothers knew exactly where to find some members of the Wild Bunch because they'd worked with them before, and that's where the real moral darkness creeps in, when you're hunting someone you used to call friend. A fly buzzes around the cabin, landing on the wanted poster you've tacked to the wall. The sketch doesn't really look like Bitter Creek, but the reward amount is clear as day. $3,000, dead or alive. 3,000 reasons to betray a friend. This system created a brutal reality where outlaws couldn't trust anyone. The higher your bounty went, the more your friends started looking at you differently, calculating, wondering if you were worth more to them dead than alive. Tell me about the Dunns, people would ask years later, and old-timers would lean in close. They weren't bounty hunters, they were bounty killers. Most people assume the term bounty hunter was common in the Old West, but it actually wasn't used much back then. These men were called manhunters, or sometimes just detectives. The profession wasn't regulated. Anyone could decide to track down a wanted man. The only credential you needed was to bring in the body. By spring of 1895, tensions were building between Frank Canton and the Dunn brothers. They were supposed to be working together to take down the Wild Bunch, but there was money involved, and where there's money, there's betrayal. B. Dunn had figured out a way to cut Canton out of the rewards. He and his brothers had a solid lead on where to find Bitter Creek Newcomb and Charlie Pierce. They just needed to get Canton out of the way first. Your coffee's done. You strap on your gun belt, tightening it a notch. Your rifle is cleaned and loaded by the door. Today's the day you're going to find your quarry. Maybe take them alive if they surrender immediately, but you're not counting on it. You step outside into the pink dawn light. The air smells like dust and sage. Your horse nickickers from the small corral, already sensing a long ride ahead. This is the life you've chosen. or maybe it chose you. Either way, you're a bounty hunter now, judge, jury, and if necessary, executioner, all with the blessing of the law. On the horizon, there's a small dust cloud. Riders coming, maybe it's the Dunn brothers, maybe it's the wild bunch. Either way, you check your gun one more time. In this country, everyone's hunting someone, and sometimes they're hunting you right back. The morning sun breaks fully over the prairie now, casting long shadows across the dusty ground. You squint against the light, watching those distant riders draw closer. Your hand rests on your revolver. In the world of bounty hunting, hesitation means death. Frank Canton was watching his own shadows that spring. He had no idea how close his past was to catching up with him, or how much blood would be spilled before his story ended. The manhunt was about to begin in earnest, and not everyone would live to see it end. 2 weeks pass. The prairie sun beats down mercilessly as you ride alongside the Dunn brothers. 5 men with weather-beaten faces and cold eyes, their horses kicking up dust clouds that hang in the still Oklahoma air. You've thrown your lot in with them because they know things, where the wild bunch hides, who shelters them, which saloon girls whisper secrets after midnight. Bitter Creek's got a sweet spot for our Rose, Bill Dunn says, breaking the silence. Man'll do anything for love, even ride straight into a bullet. The other brothers laugh, but there's no humour in it, just the hollow sound of men planning a killing. The oldest brother, Bill Dunn, is the leader. B, Dal, Calvin and George follow his lead without question. They're blood, and out here, that means something. But they're not hunting for justice. The bounties on the wild bunch would set them up for years, if they can collect. And that's the rub of bounty hunting. It wasn't enough to find your target. You had to bring them in, or at least bring enough of them back to prove they were dead. Frank Canton still watching us, Dal mutters, checking over his shoulder for the 100th time. Don't trust that badge-wearing son of a bitch. The mention of Canton makes everyone tense up. As Undersheriff of Porny County, he should be your ally in this manhunt. But something about the man puts ice in your veins. Maybe it's his eyes, too watchful, too knowing, like he's seen both sides of the law and isn't particularly bothered by either. Here's something they don't tell you in the dime novels. Bounty hunters weren't lone wolves. They worked in groups because taking down dangerous outlaws alone was suicide. They formed posses, made deals with local lawmen, and sometimes even conspired with other outlaws to betray their friends. The ground beneath your horse's hooves changes from prairie grass to harder packed dirt. You're nearing Ingles, a little nothing town that's become infamous as a hideout for the wild bunch. The place has maybe 100 residents, most of whom turn a blind eye to the outlaws in their midst. Why? Because outlaws spend money. They drink expensive whiskey, buy rounds for the house, pay for rooms in cash, and don't haggle with shopkeepers. Town up ahead, Bill Dunn says, adjusting his rifle in its scabbard. We don't all ride in together. Too obvious. You nod. Smart. The Dunns might be criminals themselves, but they're not stupid. I'll go with Calvin, you say. We'll take the saloon. You boys check the boarding house. What none of you say out loud is that Rose Dunn might be at the boarding house too, their own sister, sleeping with the enemy. The girl is barely 17, but has already chosen her side. At least that's what her brothers think. In reality, Rose is about to become the perfect bait in their deadly trap. Back in Porny, Frank Canton sits at his desk, cleaning his revolver for the 3rd time today. The man is methodical, patient. His real story would shock the territory if it ever got out, because Frank Canton isn't his real name. He was born Josiah W. Joe Horner in Virginia back in 1849. As a teenager, he became a cowboy in Texas, trailing cattle north for Texas cattleman Burke Burnett. But somewhere along the way, young Joe took a wrong turn. From 1871 to 1878, he robbed banks, rustled cattle, and killed at least one man, a Buffalo soldier, during a gunfight. In 1877, authorities finally caught up with him after he robbed a bank in Comanche, Texas. But Horner wasn't done yet. He escaped from Texas Ranger custody and fled north to Nebraska, where he shed his outlaw identity like a snake shedding its skin. Joe Horner died on the trail, and Frank Canton rode into Wyoming a new man. Wait, what? Yeah, you heard that right. The lawman hunting down the wild bunch was himself a wanted fugitive with a fake identity. The irony gets even better. Canton eventually became sheriff of Johnson County, Wyoming, before moving to Oklahoma Territory. A bank robber turned sheriff turned bounty hunter. You almost have to admire the audacity. You think Yukon will show? Calvin Dunn asks as you tie your horses behind the Ingles saloon. You check your pocket watch, 2:17 in the afternoon, hot as hell. If Rose sent that letter like Bill said, he'll come running. And if he brings Pierce with him, you pat your revolver. More bounty for us. The saloon is like every other frontier watering hole. Dim, smelling of stale beer, tobacco, and unwashed bodies. A handful of men lean against the bar, eyeing you suspiciously as you enter. The piano player doesn't miss a note, but his eyes follow you too. Whiskey, you tell the barkeep, sliding a coin across the scarred wood. Leave the bottle. This is how you gather information. You drink, you listen, you watch. Bounty hunting wasn't just about shooting. It was about patience, about blending in until someone got drunk enough or greedy enough to tell you what you needed to know. Calvin takes a table near the back facing the door. You lean against the bar, seemingly casual but positioned to see the street through the grimy window. Every man who walks past gets a quick assessment. Height, build, weapons, the way they move. You're looking for Bitter Creek's distinctive limp, the result of a shootout with lawmen last year. The whiskey burns going down. 3 hours pass like molasses. The piano player changes. The crowd thins, then builds again as evening approaches. No sign of Newcomb or any of the wild bunch. Then a girl slips through the batwing doors. Young, pretty, moving with purpose. Rose Dunn. She doesn't acknowledge you or her brother, just takes a seat at a small table and orders coffee. She's here, Calvin mutters as you refill his glass. That means they're coming. Outside, the sun begins its descent, painting the dusty street gold. Shadows lengthen. Perfect ambush weather. What's about to happen isn't a fair fight. It's not going to be a shootout at high noon with men facing each other down the middle of the street. That's movie nonsense. Real bounty hunters didn't announce themselves. They didn't give their quarry a sporting chance. They waited until their target was vulnerable, sleeping, drunk, with a woman, unarmed. Then they struck. Fast, hard, final. Back in his office, Frank Canton reviews what he knows about the Dunn brothers. They're unreliable, but they have connections to the wild bunch that he lacks. He needs them, for now. But he doesn't trust them. Especially not Bill Dunn, who's been asking too many questions about Canton's past. Marshall, a deputy, interrupts his thoughts. Telegram from Ingles. The Dunns have been spotted. Canton folds the paper carefully. Saddle my horse. As he straps on his gun belt, Canton considers what he knows. The Dunns plan to ambush members of the wild bunch who might be coming to visit Rose. They didn't tell Canton when or where, trying to cut him out of the reward money. Amateurs, he mutters, checking his Winchester rifle. They've forgotten the cardinal rule of the frontier. Betrayal works both ways. Night falls completely. You and Calvin have moved outside, positioning yourselves in the shadows across from the boarding house. Bill and the other brothers have spread out, covering all exits. Rose left the saloon an hour ago, presumably to wait in her room for Newcomb. Movement, Calvin whispers, nodding toward the edge of town. Two riders moving cautiously. Even in the darkness, you can make out Bitter Creek Newcomb's lanky frame and Charlie Pierce's distinctive hat. They're armed but relaxed, expecting to visit a sweetheart, not ride into an ambush. Your mouth goes dry. This is the moment. These men are worth $5,000 together, enough to buy a decent ranch, enough to start fresh somewhere the Dunns aren't known as cattle thieves. You've never killed a man for money before, but there's always a first time. The two outlaws dismount at the hitching post outside the boarding house. They're laughing about something, completely unaware. Newcomb stretches, wincing at his old wound, the one Rose's brother B gave him in a previous encounter. Now? Calvin breathes. You shake your head. Let them get inside first. This isn't just about making sure they don't escape. It's about the story you'll tell afterward. They went for their guns sounds better than we shot them in the street before they knew we were there. Even bounty hunters have to maintain some kind of moral fiction. But as the two men reach the porch steps, something changes. Newcomb stops suddenly, puts a hand on Pierce's arm. They both scan the darkness, suddenly alert. Years of living as wanted men have given them a sixth sense for danger. Something's wrong, Newcomb says, loud enough for you to hear. It's too quiet. In that moment, everything unravels. Bill Dunn, impatient as always, steps out from his hiding place. Evening Bitter Creek, he calls, rifle raised. What happens next is chaos. Guns drawn, shots fired, men scattering. Bitter Creek and Pierce dive for cover, returning fire. A window shatters. Someone screams, probably Rose, realizing her brothers are trying to kill her lover. The air fills with gun smoke and the thunderclap of revolvers. You squeeze off two shots, aiming for movement in the darkness, not sure if you hit anything. Calvin curses as a bullet kicks up dirt near his feet. This is the reality of frontier violence. Not heroic duels, but confused. Terrifying exchanges of gunfire where you're as likely to hit a friend as an enemy. When it's over, the silence feels absolute. Your ears ring from the gunshots. Bitter Creek and Pierce have vanished, escaping in the confusion. Bill Dunn is cursing a blue streak, nursing a bullet graze on his arm. No one dead, nothing to show for the ambush except wasted ammunition and a blown opportunity. They'll be halfway to Indian territory by sunrise. B. Dunn spits. Rose warned them somehow. The accusation hangs in the air. Their own sister betraying them for an outlaw. But you're not so sure. Something about the timing feels wrong. Newcomb and Pierce were suspicious before anything happened, before they even reached Rose. The ride back to Porny is silent and tense. The Dunns are furious at the failed ambush and at each other. You keep your thoughts to yourself, watching, waiting. There's more going on here than a simple bounty hunt. 2 days later, Frank Canton calls you into his office. He looks tired, the lines around his eyes deeper than usual. The Dunns are planning something, he says without preamble. Bill's been asking questions about my time in Wyoming. You nod, waiting. Canton rarely reveals anything without purpose. I need you to stay close to them, find out what they're planning. They don't trust me, you point out. Not after Ingles. Canton's smile doesn't reach his eyes. Make them trust you. Tell them I've been skimming bounty money. Tell them whatever they want to hear. That night, you find B. Dunn in his usual corner of the saloon. He's drunk, angry about the failed ambush. It doesn't take much to get him talking. Bill says Canton ain't who he claims to be. B. slurs, leaning close. Says he's actually some outlaw from Texas. Joe something. Your blood runs cold, but you keep your face neutral. That's a serious accusation. B shrugs. Bill's got connections in Wyoming. Says Canton was a hired gun for the cattle barons during some range war, killed innocent homesteaders. This is bigger than you thought. If the Dunns expose Canton, the entire territorial justice system could be compromised. A fugitive posing as a lawman for years, the newspapers would have a field day. What's Bill planning to do with this information? You ask carefully. B's smile is ugly. Leverage. Canton's been holding out on bounty money. We aim to get our fair share now. The plot is simple. Blackmail. The Dunns know Canton's secret and plan to use it to extort money from him. But they've underestimated the man. Canton didn't survive this long by letting himself be cornered. Back at your cabin, you consider your options. Warn Canton, let the Dunns spring their trap. There's money to be made either way, but also bodies likely to drop. The question is whose body you want to avoid being among them. By May 1895, the situation has reached a breaking point. The Dunns and Canton have been locked in a silent war of wills, neither side making a direct move. The bounty hunting continues. There are still members of the wild bunch at large, but the atmosphere is poisonous with suspicion. Then something unexpected happens. Bitter Creek Newcomb and Charlie Pierce reappear at the Dunn family's own home. Rose has maintained contact with her outlaw lover, and he's foolish enough to visit her right under her brother's noses. It's May 2nd, a perfect spring day when Bitter Creek and Pierce ride up to the Dunn house to visit Rose. What they don't know is that her brothers are waiting, watching through the windows, fingers on triggers. As the two outlaws dismount, the Dunn brothers open fire without warning. No chance to surrender, no pretense of arrest, just cold-blooded killing for the bounty money. Bitter Creek and Pierce fall riddled with bullets, dead before they hit the ground. Rose screams, running to her lover's body, but it's too late. The man she loved is gone, betrayed and murdered by her own blood. The Dunn brothers stand over the bodies, not with regret, but with calculation. $5,000 for Newcomb, another $5,000 for Pierce. 10,000 reasons to kill men they once called friends. When Canton arrives hours later, the bodies are already loaded on a wagon bound for Guthrie, where Marshal Nix will pay the bounty. The undersheriff takes one look at the scene and knows exactly what happened. "You didn't even try to take them alive," he says, his voice flat. Bill Dunn shrugs. Poster says dead or alive. They're just as dead as they need to be. What Canton notices, what you notice too, is something disturbing about the bodies. The bullet wounds aren't consistent with men who were shot during a gunfight. The patterns suggest men who were lying down, perhaps sleeping when the bullets tore into them, executed, murdered in cold blood. But the territorial authorities aren't about to quibble over how outlaws met their end. Dead is dead, and the bounty will be paid just the same. This is the dark reality of frontier justice. The line between lawman and outlaw wasn't just thin, sometimes it didn't exist at all. The same man could be both, depending on which side of a wanted poster his face appeared. As the wagon pulls away with its grim cargo, you catch Canton watching Bill Dunn with a calculating expression. The undersheriff knows the Dunns are planning to expose him, and now they've just proven how casually they're willing to kill. The hunters have become the hunted, and only one side can survive what's coming next. The bodies of Bitter Creek Newcomb and Charlie Pierce lie side by side on crude wooden tables in the undertaker's back room. Flies buzz in the May heat, already drawn to the blood-soaked clothes. Marshal Evett Nix circles the corpses, nodding with grim satisfaction. $10,000. He says to the Dunn brothers. 5,000 each. That's a fair price for these two. Bill Dunn spits tobacco juice onto the floor. We earned every penny. You hang back in the shadows, watching. The smell of death and formaldehyde makes your stomach turn, but you keep your face neutral. Show weakness in this company, and you become a target. Frank Canton stands off to the side, his eyes fixed not on the bodies, but on the Dunn brothers. There's something calculating in his gaze, like a man tallying debts that will soon come due. "How'd you manage to get the drop on them?" Nix asks, looking at the bullet wounds. "Bitter Creek was quick on the draw. They came to see our Rose," George Dunn says. "Weren't expecting trouble from family." The words hang in the air. Betraying family. There's nothing lower out here except maybe betraying friends. The Dunns have now done both. After the bounty paperwork is signed, you follow the brothers to the bank. $10,000 gets counted out in crisp bills, more money than most frontier folk will see in a decade. The banker's hands tremble slightly as he counts. Everyone knows where this money came from. Blood money. "You're cut," Bill Dunn says later, sliding $500 across the table to you back at the saloon. "For keeping watch." It's less than agreed upon, but you know better than to argue. The Dunns aren't in a generous mood, especially with Canton breathing down their necks. Plus, there's the matter of Rose. The girl hasn't spoken to her brothers since the killings. Some say she's left town entirely, unable to live with the men who murdered her lover. "What about Canton?" you ask quietly. "He knows." "Knows what?" B. Dunn's voice has a dangerous edge. "That Newcomb and Pierce weren't shot in self-defense. Those wounds tell a different story." The Dunn brothers exchange glances. "Don't matter," Bill finally says. "Dead is dead. Reward's the same either way." He's right about the reward, but wrong about what matters. In the Wild West, reputation was everything, and word is spreading about how the Dunn brothers operate, not as legitimate bounty hunters taking dangerous men alive when possible, but as cold-blooded killers who'd shoot a man in his sleep if there was money in it. Back at his office, Canton pulls a file from his desk. Inside are telegrams from Wyoming, letters from Texas, wanted posters with faces that look eerily familiar. He's been building this file on the Dunn brothers for months, not for any official investigation. This is personal. Canton takes a bottle from his drawer and pours a generous measure. The whiskey burns, but it steadies his hands. The Dunns know his secret. It's only a matter of time before they try to use it against him. He needs to strike first. But there's a complication. Word has come down from Judge Isaac Parker, the infamous hanging judge of Fort Smith, Arkansas. He wants the rest of the wild bunch taken care of, and he doesn't much care how it happens. The three guardsmen, legendary lawman Heck Thomas, Bill Tillman, and Chris Madsen, have been authorized to form posses and hunt down the remaining outlaws by any means necessary. The Dunns, despite their questionable methods, are now part of those posses. They've got Heck Thomas's ear, and the old manhunter values results over propriety. If Canton moves against the Dunns now, he'll have more enemies than he can handle. So he waits, watches, plans. Summer arrives with brutal heat. The manhunt for the wild bunch intensifies. Bill Doolin, the gang's leader, has gone to ground, but rumours place him near Lawson in what will eventually become Porny County. His wife and child are there, and even outlaws get homesick. You ride with different posses over these months, sometimes with the Dunns, sometimes with other lawmen. The rewards keep coming, smaller than the Newcomb and Pierce bounties, but steady. You've saved nearly $2,000, enough to maybe buy land somewhere people don't know your name or your deeds. One sweltering afternoon, you find yourself riding alongside Heck Thomas himself. The legendary manhunter is in his 50s now, face weathered like old saddle leather, eyes sharp as a hawk's. He's tracked more outlaws than anyone in the territories. "You've been riding with the Dunns," Thomas says, not a question. "Some," you admit. "They know the territory." Thomas snorts. They know it because they've broken the law across most of it. Bill Dunn was rustling cattle before he started collecting bounties. People change, you offer, not believing it yourself. No. Thomas shakes his head. They don't. They just find new ways to be who they've always been. The words stick with you, especially when you think about Frank Canton. Has he changed, or just found a new outlet for his outlaw instincts? September brings cooler weather and a breakthrough in the hunt for Bill Doolin. The Wild Bunch leader has been spotted in Eureka Springs, Arkansas. Bill Tilghman, the quietest and deadliest of the three guardsmen, volunteers to go after him alone. Too many men spook him, Tillman explains at the planning meeting. I'll bring him in. Dead or alive? Bill Dunn asks, a hungry look in his eyes. Tilghman's gaze is cold. The law prefers them alive, Dunn. Justice is supposed to happen in courtrooms, not back alleys. The rebuke is clear. The Dunn's reputation has spread. Even among hardened lawmen, there are lines you don't cross. Killing unarmed men in their sleep, that's murder, not justice, no matter what the wanted poster says. While Tilghman heads to Arkansas, tension builds in Porny. The Dunns, flush with reward money, have been drinking heavily, bragging about their kills. Bill Dunn in particular has been hinting that he knows things about certain lawmen that could end careers, or worse. Canton avoids the saloons, keeps to himself, but he's watching, always watching. You find yourself caught between worlds. The Dunns still consider you one of their posse, but Canton has been asking you to report on their movements. Double-crossing bounty hunters is a dangerous game, but then again, so is bounty hunting itself. Dunn's planning something you tell Canton one evening, meeting behind the livery stable. He's been talking to that butcher who got arrested for receiving stolen cattle last year, the one the Dunns used to sell to. Canton nods. I know. I've been watching him too. Why not just arrest him? You've got plenty on him by now. The undersheriff's smile is cold. It's complicated. The Dunns have friends in high places now. Those bounties bought them influence. What Canton doesn't say, what he doesn't need to say, is that the Dunns also have something on him, knowledge that could destroy everything he's built. January 1896 brings the news. Tilghman has captured Bill Doolin alive in Eureka Springs. It's a sensation. The leader of the Wild Bunch taken without a shot fired by one man walking into a bathhouse and placing a gun against Doolin's head while he soaked in a tub. That's how it's done, Thomas tells anyone who'll listen in the Porny saloon. Clean, professional. Doolin will hang after a proper trial. The Dunn brothers fume. There's no bounty to collect since Tilghman made the arrest as an official lawman. $20,000, the highest bounty ever offered in the territory, gone. But the story doesn't end there. 2 weeks after his capture, Bill Doolin escapes from the Guthrie jail, along with several other prisoners, including Dynamite Dick Clifton. The manhunt begins anew, with even higher stakes. Doolin is now not just an outlaw, but a fugitive who's humiliated the law. Double the reward, Nix announces. $40,000 for Doolin, dead or alive. The territory explodes with bounty hunters, lawmen and posies, all searching for the escaped outlaw. The three guardsmen coordinate the official manhunt, but dozens of independent operators join the chase, drawn by the massive reward. Among them, the Dunn brothers are particularly determined. $40,000 would set them up for life. They could leave the territories entirely, head to California or back east where no one knows their names or deeds. We'll find him first, Bill Dunn promises, checking his rifles. We've got sources the lawmen don't. What he means, though he doesn't say it aloud, is that they're willing to use methods the lawmen won't. Torture, threats against family members, burning down houses to flush out hiding outlaws. The brutal winter gives way to spring. Still no sign of Doolin. The manhunt continues, but with less intensity as other crimes demand attention. The frontier doesn't pause its violence just because one famous outlaw is at large. Then in April, Dunn receives word from an informant. Doolin has been spotted near his wife's family home outside Lawson. He's risking everything to visit his wife and young son. "We move tonight," Dunn tells his brothers. "Just us. No lawmen to split the reward with. You're included in the plan by default. The Dunns need every gun they can trust, and while they don't fully trust you, they believe money keeps you loyal. They're not entirely wrong." The ambush is set for the small farmhouse where Doolin's wife is staying. 6 men with rifles surrounding a sleeping house, waiting for one of the most dangerous men in the territory to walk into their trap. Hours pass. Midnight comes and goes. Your legs cramp from crouching in the underbrush, but you dare not move. The Dunns are in position, patient as spiders. Just before dawn, a lone rider approaches. He's cautious, circling the property once before dismounting. Even in the faint pre-dawn light, you recognize Bill Doolin from the wanted posters. He moves with a slight limp, an old wound that never healed right. He ties his horse to a post, checks his guns, then heads for the back door of the farmhouse. No one moves. The plan is to take him inside, where there's less chance of him escaping in the darkness. 10 minutes pass, then 20. Bill Dunn gives the signal. 3 short whistles, barely audible. You move toward the house with the others, spreading out to cover all exits. Through a window, you see lamplight, Doolin reuniting with his wife and child. Something twists in your gut. This doesn't feel like justice. It feels like an ambush on a family moment. Bill Dunn kicks in the front door. Doolin hands up. What follows is chaos. Gunshots, screaming, breaking glass. Doolin fires back from somewhere inside, his bullets splintering the doorframe inches from your head. A woman's voice, his wife, begging everyone to stop. In the confusion, something unexpected happens. Doolin manages to slip out a back window, firing as he goes. He makes it to his horse, despite taking what looks like a bullet to the shoulder. The Dunns fire after him, but in the darkness, they miss. "Follow him," Bill Dunn roars, already running for his own horse. The chase is on. 5 riders pursuing 1 wounded man across the Oklahoma countryside. Doolin is desperate, riding hard despite his injury. He knows what capture means, either death on the spot or a return to jail, followed by a hangman's noose. Dawn breaks fully as you crest a hill and spot Doolin's horse, riderless, grazing by a creek. The outlaw has gone to ground. "Spread out," Bill orders. He can't have gone far, not bleeding like that. You fan out through the brush and trees along the creek, every sense heightened, listening for movement, watching for disturbed ground or broken branches. This is the most dangerous moment in any manhunt, when the quarry is cornered, wounded, with nothing to lose. A gunshot cracks the morning silence. Then another. You run toward the sound, heart pounding. Through the trees, you see Dunn on the ground, clutching his leg. Blood seeps between his fingers. 20 yards away, Doolin is reloading his revolver behind a fallen log. Bill Dunn crashes through the underbrush, firing wildly. Doolin returns fire, more disciplined, making each shot count. It's an uneven match, 1 wounded man against 4 hunters. The outcome is inevitable. When it's over, Bill Doolin lies dead, 5 bullets in his body, none from your gun. You held back, watching rather than participating. Bill Dunn stands over the outlaw's corpse, a strange expression on his face. Not triumph, not relief, something closer to disappointment, as if he's lost his purpose along with his quarry. $40,000, he says finally. Get him on a horse. We're taking him to Guthrie. B's wound isn't serious. A clean shot through the meaty part of his thigh. He'll recover, though he'll have a limp to match the man who gave it to him. As you help load Doolin's body across his own horse, you realise something has changed. The hunt is over. The wild bunch is effectively finished. There are still a few members at large, but without Doolin, they're just scattered outlaws, not a gang. More importantly, the Dunns have served their purpose as far as the law is concerned. The dangerous criminals are dead or captured. The territories are safer, but men like the Dunns don't just fade away when they're no longer useful. They find new targets, new sources of income, and Frank Canton is watching them, waiting for his moment. Back in Guthrie, Marshal Nix personally counts out the reward money, $40,000 in stacks of fresh bills. The Dunns divide it 5 ways, $8,000 each. Your share is enough to buy that land you've been dreaming of, enough to start fresh somewhere far from Oklahoma territory. But something holds you back. The story isn't over. There's a reckoning coming between Canton and the Dunns, and somehow you know you'll be caught in the middle when it happens. We're heading to California, Bill Dunn tells you as you leave the marshal's office. Once B's leg heals up, nothing left for us here. You nod, non-committal. Good luck. You should come along, he adds, surprising you. We work well together. Could be opportunities out west. Before you can answer, you spot Frank Canton across the street, watching. The undersheriff tips his hat, a gesture that seems almost mocking. Bill Dunn follows your gaze, and his expression hardens. "That badge-wearing son of a bitch," he mutters. "Think I don't know what he's planning? He's been building a case against us for months." "For what?" you ask, though you already know. "For Newcomb and Pierce, says we executed them." Dunn spits, like it matters how outlaws die. It matters to Canton, and soon it will matter to everyone in Porny County. As summer approaches, the Dunns remain in Oklahoma, despite their talk of California. B's leg is healing slowly, and Bill has unfinished business with Frank Canton. The tension between them has become an open secret in Porny, 2 predators circling each other, waiting for weakness. "Watch yourself," Heck Thomas warns you one hot afternoon. When those 2 finally clash, anyone nearby is liable to get caught in the crossfire. You nod, appreciating the concern from the legendary manhunter. "I've been thinking of moving on." Thomas studies you for a moment. You've got the makings of a good lawman, you know, not like the Dunns. They're just killers with temporary permission. The words stay with you as you ride back to your cabin. Maybe there is another path. Maybe the blood money in your pocket doesn't have to define your future. But first, you need to survive what's coming, because Frank Canton isn't just building a case against the Dunns. He's planning to eliminate them entirely, and the Dunns know it. The storm clouds are gathering over Pawnee County, and when the lightning strikes, it will change the territory forever. Summer in Oklahoma territory brings sweltering heat that seems to ignite tempers as readily as it does the dry prairie grass. You've taken to sleeping outside your cabin most nights, the interior too stifling even with windows open. The Doolin bounty money sits hidden beneath a loose floorboard, inside, still mostly untouched. Every time you think about spending it, something holds you back. It's not guilt exactly, more like caution. Money earned from death has a way of bringing more death along with it. The Dunns haven't left for California as planned. B's leg is healing, but there's another reason for their delayed departure. Bill Dunn has been meeting with territorial politicians in Guthrie, using his newfound wealth to buy influence. The bounty hunter who helped eliminate the wild bunch now finds doors open to him that were previously shut tight. Frank Canton knows this. He watches from the shadows, gathering information, building his case piece by piece. The undersheriff rarely sleeps these days, driven by something beyond mere duty. The feud between him and the Dunns has become personal, though few understand just how deep it runs. Canton's digging into our past. Bill Dunn tells you one evening at the saloon. He's invited you to drink with him and his brothers, a calculated show of trust. Got people asking questions back in Texas about cattle we sold years ago. You sip your whiskey slowly. Statute of limitations must be up on that by now. Ain't about the law, B. Dunn interjects. His injured leg is propped on a chair, the wound still seeping enough to stain his bandages. It's about reputation. Man gets known as a cattle thief. Certain doors close to him. The irony isn't lost on you. The Dunns are worried about being labelled thieves while proudly wearing the mantle of killers. What's Canton's game, you ask? Fishing for information you can bring back to the undersheriff later. This double role has become dangerously comfortable. Bill leans forward, lowering his voice. We know things about him, things that would end more than just his career, and he knows we know. Dal and George Dunn exchange glances, but say nothing. Calvin stares into his glass, seemingly distracted. The brothers aren't as unified as they once were. The money has created new tensions between them. Dal wants to leave immediately for California. George has been talking about buying a ranch in Wyoming. Only Bill and Bee seem determined to stay and confront Canton. What about you? Bill asks suddenly. You sticking around or moving on? You shrug, non-committal. Haven't decided yet. Well, decide soon, Bee says with surprising heat. Way things are heading, folks are going to have to pick sides. Can't sit on the fence forever. The next morning, you relay the conversation to Canton in the livery stable where his horse is being shod. The undersheriff listens impassively, his face revealing nothing. They're right about one thing, he says finally. People will have to choose sides. And what side am I on, exactly? You ask, irritated by his cryptic manner. Canton studies you for a long moment. That depends. Do you believe there's a difference between hunting outlaws and murdering them in their sleep? Before you can answer, the blacksmith approaches with Canton's horse. The animal's hooves clop on the packed earth. Fresh shoes gleaming in the morning sun. Good work, Canton tells the smith, paying him extra. Horse needs to be ready for hard riding. Might be leaving town soon. The comment catches your attention. Going somewhere? Just being prepared. Canton's smile doesn't reach his eyes. Storm's coming. That evening, news spreads through Porny that changes everything. B. Dunn has received a commission as a special deputy U.S. Marshal. The appointment comes directly from Marshal Nix's office, bypassing the normal channels. Bill Dunn's political connections have paid off in spectacular fashion. A deputy marshal, Canton says when you bring him the news. He's at his desk, cleaning his revolver with methodical precision. That's a clever move. Now if I move against him, I'm attacking a federal officer. You still planning to move against him? Canton reassembles his gun with practiced ease, checking the action twice before holstering it. He murdered those men. Newcomb and Pierce shot them while they were sleeping, then claimed self-defense. That's not law. That's not even bounty hunting. That's just killing for money. The reward posters said dead or alive, you point out. There's a difference between killing a man who's shooting at you and executing him in his bed. Canton's voice is cold. The Dunns crossed that line. They'll cross others if they're not stopped. You can't argue with his logic, but something doesn't add up. Canton's crusade against the Dunns feels too personal, too driven. There's more to this story than he's telling. What's your real history with the Dunns? You ask directly. Canton's eyes narrow. What do you mean? This isn't just about Newcomb and Pierce. There's something else, something between you and Bill Dunn specifically. For a moment, you think Canton will deny it or deflect. Instead, he sighs heavily, suddenly looking older than his years. Bill Dunn has been asking questions in Wyoming about my time there during the Johnson County War. The Johnson County War. Even out in the territories, people had heard of the bloody conflict between wealthy cattlemen and small ranchers in Wyoming. Hired guns, mass killings, the US cavalry called in to restore order. You were a sheriff there, you say, remembering bits of Canton's background. I was. He stares out the window, eyes focused on something distant. I also worked for the Wyoming Stock Growers Association. They hired protection during the Troubles. Protection, a euphemism for mercenaries, hired guns. The pieces start falling into place. The Dunns found out you did something during that war, something that could ruin you. Canton turns back to you, his face a mask. Let's just say I was on the wrong side of history. And Bill Dunn is the type to use that kind of information. The next few days pass in tense anticipation. B. Dunn proudly wears his deputy marshal badge around town, making sure Canton sees it. The brothers frequent the saloons, buying drinks for anyone who'll stand with them, building their own coalition. Canton works quietly, methodically. He revives the old cattle rustling charges against B. Dunn, finding new witnesses, building a legal case that even Dunn's new badge can't deflect. It's a chess match between two ruthless men, each moving pieces into position for the final confrontation. You keep your head down, playing both sides, passing selective information to each camp. It's a dangerous game, but it keeps you valuable to both parties, and that means alive. On a sweltering afternoon in early August, you're in the general store when Dal Dunn bursts through the door. Canton's done it, he announces to his brothers, who are pricing new rifles. Got the butcher to testify against B about the stolen cattle. Judge issued a warrant this morning. Bill Dunn's face darkens with fury. He wouldn't dare arrest a deputy marshal. Warrant's already with the sheriff, Dal insists. They'll be coming for B any time now. The store falls silent. Even the shopkeeper stops pretending to rearrange merchandise, frozen in place by the tension. Let them come, B says, touching the badge on his chest. I'm a federal officer now. Canton's just a county undersheriff. He tries to arrest me. He'll regret it. The brothers leave, but not before Bill Dunn fixes you with a suspicious stare. You coming? You make a show of checking the supplies you've been gathering. Got to finish here. I'll catch up. Once they're gone, you slip out the back and head straight for Canton's office. The undersheriff is already strapping on his gun belt when you enter. The Dunns know about the warrant, you tell him without preamble. Canton nods, unsurprised. I figured they would. Too many loose lips in the courthouse. B says he'll resist arrest, says his marshal's badge trumps your authority. He's wrong. Canton checks his revolver one final time. A deputy marshal commission doesn't erase past crimes, especially not when those crimes were committed in my jurisdiction. You follow Canton out to the street, uncertain of your role in what's about to unfold. The undersheriff seems to sense your hesitation. You don't have to be part of this, he says, surprisingly gentle. You've done your part bringing information. What happens next? It's between me and the Dunns. Before you can respond, a shout comes from down the street. B. Dunn stands in front of the saloon, his brothers flanking him. His deputy marshal's badge gleams in the afternoon sun, as does the revolver strapped to his hip. Canton, he calls, his voice carrying across the dusty street. Heard you've been looking for me. People scatter, diving into doorways and between buildings. Everyone in Porny knows what's coming. They've seen it building for weeks. Canton walks forward with measured steps. You hang back, hand hovering near your own gun, unsure which side you'll support if bullets start flying. I have a warrant for your arrest, Dunn, Canton says calmly when he's 20 paces away. Cattle rustling, Judge Parker's court. I'm a Deputy United States Marshal, B responds, thumbs hooked in his belt near his holster. You've got no authority over me. The badge doesn't wash away your crimes. Come peacefully and you'll get a fair trial. Bill Dunn steps forward, positioning himself slightly behind his brother. We all know there's nothing fair about this, Canton. This is personal. The law isn't personal, Canton responds, but there's something in his tone that betrays him. This is personal, deeply so. The law? Bill laughs harshly. That's rich coming from you, Joe Horner. The name falls like a thunderclap in the silent street. Joe Horner. You've never heard it before, but Canton's reaction tells you everything. The undersheriff goes rigid, his face draining of colour. That's right, Bill continues, sensing advantage. We know who you really are. The Texas bank robber who escaped jail and made himself a new identity. The outlaw who became a lawman. Canton doesn't deny it. His silence is confirmation enough. You arrest my brother, Bill says, and everyone in the territory will know Frank Canton doesn't exist, that the great lawman is just a fugitive playing dress-up. For a long moment, no one moves. The tension stretches like a bowstring pulled too tight. Then Canton does something unexpected. He smiles. You think that matters now? After all this time? His voice is calm, almost amused. I've spent 20 years on this side of the law, caught more outlaws than you've had hot meals. My record speaks for itself. Your record? B snarls. You're a wanted man, Canton, or should I call you Horner? Once folks know the truth, you'll be the one in chains. Canton's smile fades. Maybe, but first, you're coming with me, badge or no badge. Everything happens at once. B's hand drops to his gun. Canton moves with the speed of a striking snake, his revolver clearing leather before B's fingers close around his grip. A single shot cracks the air. B Dunn staggers backward, a look of shock on his face. A dark stain spreads across his shirt, directly over his heart. He falls without a word, dead before he hits the dirt. Bill Dunn roars with rage, reaching for his own weapon, but Dal grabs his arm, holding him back. Not here, Dal hisses. Not like this. He'll kill you too. The street is frozen in tableau. Canton standing with his smoking gun still raised. B Dunn sprawled in the dirt, blood pooling beneath him. The remaining brothers paralysed between grief and fury. Anyone else want to resist arrest? Canton asks quietly, his eyes locked on Bill Dunn. The standoff stretches for 10 heartbeats. 20. Then Bill slowly raises his hands, stepping away from his dead brother. This isn't over, Canton, he says, voice raw with emotion. Not by a long shot. It never is, Canton replies, holstering his weapon. Get your brother's body to the undertaker, then get out of my town, all of you. The Dunns retreat, carrying B's lifeless form between them. The crowd that had hidden during the confrontation now emerges, murmuring in shocked tones. Deputy Marshal B. Dunn shot dead in the street by Undersheriff Frank Canton. It's the stuff of dime novel legends, already growing in the telling as people spread the news. You approach Canton, who stands alone in the street staring after the Dunns. Joe Horner? You ask quietly. Canton doesn't look at you. A ghost from another life. A man who died a long time ago. Bill Dunn will spread the story. Your secret's out. Let him. Canton finally turns to you. Some secrets lose their power once they're told, and some men can't be destroyed by their past. As the sun sets on Porny, casting long shadows across the street where B. Dunn died, you realise the story is far from over. Bill Dunn isn't the type to accept defeat or the death of his brother. He'll be back with a plan for revenge that will shake the territory to its core. And Frank Canton, or Joe Horner, will be waiting for him. A lawman with an outlaw's instincts. A man who understands exactly how dangerous his enemy is. Because in the Wild West, a badge didn't make you a lawman any more than a wanted poster made you an outlaw. What mattered was which side of the gun you were on when the shooting started, and who was left standing when the smoke cleared. That night, you lie awake on your bedroll outside the cabin, staring at stars that seem impossibly distant from the blood and dust of human concerns. The territory feels different now, charged with anticipation. Word of B. Dunn's death will spread like wildfire. The remaining brothers will regroup, plan their next move. Canton will prepare for their return. And you're still caught between worlds, between loyalties. The bounty money still sits beneath your floorboard, blood money that seems to whisper your name in the darkness. Maybe it's time to take it and ride out. Head west to California or north to the gold fields. Leave the Dunns and Canton to their private war. But something tells you it's already too late for that. You're part of this story now, whether you want to be or not. And in the Wild West, stories like these only end one way. With more blood in the dust. Dawn creeps over Porny with somber light. The town feels different after yesterday's killing. People move faster, speak quieter, cast nervous glances toward the undertakers where B. Dunn's body awaits burial. No one lingers in the street where he fell. You saddle your horse early, planning to ride the perimeter of town, checking if the remaining Dunn brothers have left as Canton ordered, or if they're regrouping nearby. The weight of your revolver against your hip is somehow more noticeable today. After seeing how fast Canton drew, you've been practicing your own quick draw in private, painfully aware of the gap between your skills and his. Heading out? The voice startles you. Canton stands in the shadow of the livery stable, looking like he hasn't slept at all. His eyes are bloodshot, but alert. "Just scouting," you answer, tightening your cinch. "Seeing if the Dunns cleared out." Canton nods. "They won't go far, not with B in the ground." "You really think they'll come back, after what happened to B?" The undersheriff's laugh is without humour. "You don't know Bill Dunn very well if you're asking that question." He's right, of course. Men like Bill Dunn don't just walk away from a brother's killing, badge or no badge. Revenge isn't just likely, it's inevitable. "What about your situation?" you ask carefully. "The whole Joe Horner thing?" Canton's face hardens. "Already sent telegrams to the governor and Marshal Nix explaining the situation. Got ahead of Bill Dunn's version. And we'll see." He shrugs with forced casualness. 20 years of solid lawman work against an old Texas warrant. Might be enough, might not be too. That's the part he doesn't say. Even in 1896, bureaucracy moves slow. By the time officials decide whether Frank Canton keeps his badge or gets shipped back to Texas in chains, Bill Dunn could have put him in the ground beside his brother. "Watch yourself out there," Canton says as you mount up. "The Dunns have friends." The morning air is cool as you ride out of town, a brief respite before the day's heat. Your horse's hooves kick up little dust clouds that hang in the still air. The land around Porny is mostly flat, with scattered stands of trees marking creek beds, perfect ambush country. You ride carefully, scanning the horizon, noting the movement of birds that might signal humans disturbing their usual patterns. 2 hours out, you spot what you're looking for: smoke from a campfire, hidden in a grove of cottonwoods along a creek. Approaching cautiously, you leave your horse tied 100 yards away and proceed on foot. Voices drift through the trees, angry and determined. Not waiting for some circuit judge, Bill Dunn's distinctive growl carries clearly. "Canton shot B down like a dog. Badge don't give him that right. He'll claim self-defense," another voice. Sounds like Dal. "B went for his gun first. Because Canton pushed him to it," Bill snaps. "Backed him into a corner." You edge closer, staying low in the thick underbrush. Through gaps in the foliage, you can make out 3 men, Bill, Dal, and George Dunn, huddled around a small fire. Calvin is nowhere to be seen. "We do this smart," Bill continues, calmer now. "Not a straight-up fight in the street. Canton's too fast for that. We need an edge." "What kind of edge?" George asks. Bill stirs the fire with a stick, face grim in the flickering light. "The kind that comes from knowing a man's schedule, his habits, when he'll be vulnerable. He doesn't drink much," Dal points out. "Doesn't visit whorehouses. Man's careful. Everyone's got weak spots," Bill insists. "Even the great Frank Canton." You've heard enough. Slowly, carefully, you back away from the camp. Once clear, you hurry to your horse and ride hard for Porny. Canton needs to know the Dunns are planning an ambush, but halfway back, you rein in hard, suddenly uncertain. Who are you really working for in this fight? Canton's been straight with you mostly, but he's living a lie as big as Texas. The Dunns are killers, but their grievance is real. Canton did goad B into drawing, giving himself the excuse to shoot. There's no clean side here, just men with guns and grudges, all waist-deep in blood. You sit your horse on a small rise overlooking the town, caught between loyalties. The smart play would be to grab your bounty money and ride out. Let Canton and the Dunns settle their feud without you in the middle. But running feels wrong somehow, like leaving a story half-finished. By the time you ride back into Porny, it's mid-afternoon. The town is buzzing with news. Frank Canton has been suspended pending investigation into his true identity. The telegram came from the territorial governor himself. Canton's been ordered to surrender his badge and guns until authorities sort out whether he's a legitimate lawman or an escaped Texas fugitive. You find him at his house on the edge of town, a small, neat cabin with a front porch where he sits cleaning his rifle. His badge is conspicuously absent from his chest. "They suspended you," you say, dismounting. News travels fast. He doesn't look up from his work, hands moving with practiced efficiency over the weapon's parts. You turning in your guns. Now he does look up, a flicker of amusement crossing his face. "What do you think?" "I think the Dunns are camped at Cottonwood Creek," you say, making your choice. "Planning how to kill you. Bill wants to catch you somewhere isolated. Avoid a straight-up fight." Canton nods, unsurprised. "Smart. He knows I'd drop him like I did B if we faced off." "So, what's your plan?" He slides the last piece of the rifle back into place, the click unnervingly final in the quiet afternoon. "My plan is to end this. Today." "How?" "You're suspended. If you kill Bill Dunn now, it'll look like murder. It'll be self-defense." Canton stands, slinging the rifle. "Bill's coming for me either way. I'm just choosing the battlefield." As the sun begins its descent toward the western horizon, Porny grows quiet. Word has spread about Canton's suspension and the Dunn's proximity. Folks are battening down, preparing for the storm everyone can feel coming. You find yourself in the saloon, nursing a whiskey, listening to the town gossip. The story of Canton and the Dunns has grown with each telling. Some say Canton was a famous Texas outlaw who killed 20 men before becoming a lawman. Others claim the Dunns have recruited a dozen gunmen to help them take revenge. The truth, as usual, is both less and more dramatic than the tales. "You rode with them both," a weathered cowboy says, sliding onto the bar stool beside you. "The Dunns and Canton, what's your read on how this ends?" You consider your whiskey, buying time. "Bloody," you finally answer. "It ends bloody." He nods sagely. "Always does with men like that. Too much pride, too much history, too many guns," you add. The doors swing open and conversation halts as Bill Dunn steps into the saloon. He's alone, dusty from the trail, face haggard with grief and rage. His eyes scan the room before settling on you. "There he is," he says, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Canton's little spy." The cowboy beside you vacates his stool with remarkable speed. Others edge toward doors and windows. No one wants to be caught in what's coming. "I'm just having a drink, Bill," you say, keeping your voice level, not looking for trouble. "Bit late for that." He approaches, stopping just out of arm's reach. "Saw your tracks out by our camp. Following us, were you? Running back to Canton with reports?" There's no point denying it. He deserved to know you were planning to bushwhack him. Bill's laugh is bitter. And what did he tell you about himself? About Joe Horner, the bank-robbing, jail-breaking outlaw who reinvented himself as a lawman? Did he mention that part? He didn't deny it. No, he wouldn't. Canton's not stupid. Bill signals the barkeep for a whiskey. The man delivers it with shaking hands, then retreats. You know what the funny part is? I don't even care that he used to be an outlaw. Hell, half the lawmen out here started on the wrong side of a wanted poster. "Then what do you care about?" Bill knocks back his whiskey in one swallow, grimacing at the burn. "He killed my brother, shot him down in the street like a dog." His voice cracks slightly. "B was hot-headed, sure, but he didn't deserve to die over some ancient cattle-rustling charge." For a moment, Bill Dunn isn't the notorious bounty hunter or the cattle thief. He's just a man grieving his brother, wounded and dangerous in his pain. "What are you planning, Bill?" you ask, though you already know. "What do you think? I'm going to kill Frank Canton." He says it matter-of-factly, like commenting on the weather. "Only question is whether you're going to try to stop me." Your hand rests near your revolver. Bill notices, his own hand hovering near his weapon. The saloon has emptied around you, even the barkeep ducking behind his bar. Just you and Bill Dunn, one wrong word away from guns being drawn. "I'm not dying for Frank Canton," you say carefully, "but I'm not helping you kill him either." Bill studies you, weighing your words, measuring your resolve. Finally, he nods slightly. "Fair enough. Stay out of the way then. This ends today, one way or another." He backs toward the door, never taking his eyes off you. At the threshold, he pauses. "B wasn't a bad man, you know. None of us are what the stories make us out to be, not even Canton." Then he's gone, boots crunching on the boardwalk outside, heading toward Canton's cabin on the edge of town. You release a breath you didn't realize you were holding. The barkeep emerges from hiding, pale-faced. "You best warn Canton," he says, wiping nervous sweat from his forehead. "Dunn's got that killing look in his eye." But you hesitate. Maybe this isn't your fight. Maybe the smart play is still to grab your money and ride out. The sun hangs low now, painting Porny in shades of red and gold, the perfect light for a showdown. At Canton's cabin, preparations are already underway. The undersheriff sits on his porch, revolver on his lap, rifle leaning against the wall beside him. He's positioned himself with clear sightlines to all approaches, impossible to sneak up on. "Bill Dunn's on his way," you announce, reining in your horse. "Just left the saloon. He's coming to kill you." Canton nods, unsurprised. "Figured it would be today. Sun's almost down. Last chance before full dark." "You could leave," you suggest. "Ride out. Come back when things cool down." "And go where?" Canton's smile is thin. "I've spent 20 years building this life. I'm not running from Bill Dunn or anyone else." You dismount, unsure why you're staying. This isn't your battle, but something keeps you here. Curiosity maybe, or some misplaced sense of loyalty, or perhaps just the desire to see how the story ends. "You don't have to stay," Canton says, reading your thoughts. "This is between me and Dunn." "I know, but I'm staying anyway." He accepts this with a nod, then returns to watching the road. The minutes stretch like hours as the sun continues its descent. Shadows lengthen across the dusty ground. Somewhere a nighthawk calls, its voice lonely in the gathering dusk. "Tell me something," you say, breaking the silence. "Did you really kill innocent homesteaders during the Johnson County War, like Dunn claimed?" Canton's face hardens. The Johnson County War wasn't about innocents on one side and villains on the other. It was complicated, messy. That's not an answer. No, it isn't. He sighs. "I did things in Wyoming I'm not proud of, things I justified to myself at the time, because I was on the payroll of powerful men, but I never shot an unarmed man in the back, never killed except when my own life was threatened." Whether that's the full truth, you'll never know, but it's the closest to a confession you're likely to get from Frank Canton. "Rider coming," Canton says suddenly, straightening in his chair. "Looks like Bill's decided to face me straight up after all." You peer down the road. Sure enough, a lone horseman approaches at a walk, silhouetted against the setting sun, the distinctive shape of Bill Dunn coming to avenge his brother's death. "Last chance to leave," Canton tells you. "I'll stay out of it, you promise. But I'm watching." Canton stands, checking his revolver one final time before holstering it. He steps off the porch into the yard, waiting as Bill Dunn draws closer. It's a strange moment, almost ceremonial. Two enemies approaching each other in the dying light, surrounded by the vast emptiness of the frontier. No law but what they make themselves. No justice but what they deal with their own hands. Bill reins in his horse 30 yards from the cabin, dismounting slowly. His rifle remains in its saddle scabbard, a statement of intent. This will be settled with revolvers, man to man. "Canton," he calls, voice carrying clearly in the still evening air. "Got something to settle between us?" "I know why you're here, Dunn," Canton responds, standing his ground. "But it won't bring your brother back." "Well, no, it won't." Bill advances, hand hovering near his holstered weapon. "But it'll balance the scales." They face each other across 20 yards of dust and scraggly grass. You watch from the edge of the porch, heart pounding. This is how legends are born in the West. 2 men, 2 guns, 1 survivor. "You know my reputation," Canton says evenly. "You've seen what happened to B. Walk away, Dunn. Live to fight another day." "Can't do that," Bill replies. "You know that." Canton nods, resigned. "Then let's do this properly. No more words. Draw when you're ready." Time seems to slow. Birds fall silent. The whole world holds its breath. Both men stand poised, muscles tense, eyes locked on each other. Bill moves first, his hand dropping to his revolver with impressive speed, but Canton is faster, unnaturally fast. His gun clears leather and fires while Bill's is still rising. The crack of the shot echoes across the landscape. Bill staggers, a look of surprise crossing his face. A dark stain spreads across his shirt, almost the same spot where B was hit. He manages to fire his own weapon, but the bullet goes wild, kicking up dust at Canton's feet. "Damn," Bill whispers, dropping to his knees. "You really are that fast." His revolver falls from nerveless fingers. He pitches forward into the dirt, blood pooling beneath him. Canton approaches cautiously, gun still trained on the fallen man. But it's unnecessary. Bill Dunn is dead, eyes staring sightlessly at the darkening sky. For a long moment, Canton stands over his fallen enemy, face unreadable. Then he holsters his weapon and turns to you. "It's done," he says simply. But is it? 2 Dunn brothers remain, Dal and George. Will they continue the vendetta or take this as a warning and leave the territory? That night, as word of Bill Dunn's death spreads through Porny, you sit with Canton on his porch, a bottle of whiskey between you, the stars emerging one by one overhead. What happens now, you ask? With your suspension, the Joe Horner business? Canton takes a thoughtful sip. Already got a telegram from Marshal Nix. He's arguing my case with the governor. 20 years of service against ancient charges. Odds are in my favour. And if they're not? He shrugs. Then maybe Joe Horner dies again. Maybe Frank Canton becomes someone new. The West is still big enough to reinvent yourself if you need to. You consider this, the strange fluidity of identity out here on the frontier, how a man can shed his skin like a snake, emerge as something new, how the line between outlaw and lawman is as thin as a wanted poster. What about you? Canton asks. Still planning to ride out? The question catches you off guard. You've been so focused on the conflict between Canton and the Dunns, you haven't thought about your own path forward. Not sure, you admit. Might be time for something new. Canton nods, understanding. The bounty hunting life, it changes you, makes you see people differently, as targets, as dollar amounts. Is that why you switched sides, became a lawman? He stares into his whiskey, contemplative. Partly, but mostly I just got tired of running, wanted to build something that would last. The irony isn't lost on either of you. Canton built his new life on a foundation of lies, and now those lies threaten to bring everything crashing down. Dal and George left town, you tell him, changing the subject. Saw them riding out just after sundown, heading west, looked like. They're smarter than their brothers, Canton observes, know when to fold a losing hand. But even as he says it, you both know this might not be over. Vendettas have a way of persisting in the West, passed down like twisted inheritances. The surviving Dunns might be biding their time, waiting for Canton to lower his guard. Get some sleep, Canton says finally, rising from his chair. Tomorrow's soon enough to decide what comes next. As you walk back to your cabin through the quiet streets of Porny, you feel the weight of choices pressing down. Stay or go. Keep the blood money or leave it behind. Continue this life of hunting humans or find something new. The bounty from Doolin's death would buy a decent ranch somewhere, or passage to Alaska where the gold rushes are drawing thousands, or maybe something else entirely, a normal life, if such a thing exists for someone who's done what you've done. In your cabin, you pry up the loose floorboard and look at the stacks of bills hidden beneath. Blood money, death money, but money all the same. Across town, Frank Canton sits alone on his porch, watching the road for ghosts that might yet appear. Joe Horner's past and Frank Canton's present twined together like a hangman's rope. And somewhere in the vast darkness beyond Porny, Dal and George Dunn ride west, carrying memories of dead brothers and plans for vengeance that may or may not come to fruition. The Wild West is changing, the frontier closing, the days of outlaws and bounty hunters numbered. But for now, in this moment, the old ways still hold. Men still die for honour, for money, for vengeance, and the line between hunter and hunted remains as blurred as ever. The morning after Bill Dunn's death dawns with unexpected rain. Fat droplets fall from a pewter sky, turning Porny's dirt streets to mud, washing away the blood outside Canton's cabin. You stand on your porch watching townspeople hurry between buildings, heads down against the weather, whispering about yesterday's shooting. 2 Dunn brothers dead in less than a week, both by Frank Canton's hand. The undertaker is doing good business these days. You've made your decision during the long, sleepless night. The bounty money stays hidden under the floorboards of your cabin, a gift to whoever finds it years from now. You're riding out today, rain or no rain. This chapter of your life is finished. A rider approaches through the rain, hunched in a slicker that can't quite keep out the downpour. Marshal Everett Nix himself, come all the way from Guthrie. His face is grim as he dismounts outside the sheriff's office. Whatever news he brings, it isn't good. Curious, you follow at a distance. Inside, you find Canton already seated across from Nix's temporary desk. The marshal hasn't bothered to remove his wet coat, suggesting this meeting won't be long. Frank? Nix nods in greeting as you enter. Or should I call you Joe? Canton's face remains impassive. Frank will do. You've put me in one hell of a spot, Nix continues. 2 Dunns dead, both shot by you, one wearing a deputy marshal's badge. B drew first, Canton says flatly, and Bill came hunting me, both clean kills. I don't doubt it, Nix sighs, pulling off his wet hat. But perception matters, especially with your history coming to light. You lean against the wall, silent but attentive. This is the moment when Canton's fate will be decided, when 20 years of lawman work gets measured against a youthful crime spree in Texas. The governor's reviewed your case, Nix says finally. Given your service record and the circumstances of the Dunn's deaths, he's inclined to be lenient. Canton doesn't react, but you see the tension in his shoulders ease slightly. But, Nix holds up a finger, he can't have an acknowledged outlaw serving as a territorial lawman. Too much ammunition for his political enemies. I understand, Canton says quietly. I'll resign. Already handled that part. Nix slides a paper across the desk. Effective immediately. You're a civilian again, Frank. Canton stares at his resignation letter for a long moment before tucking it into his coat. And the Texas warrant? Or still in effect, technically, Nix grimaces. But I've had words with the Texas authorities. They're not particularly interested in pursuing a 20-year-old bank robbery case. Not worth the extradition hassle. As long as you maintain a low profile, they'll let sleeping dogs lie. It's not a pardon, but it's freedom of a sort. Canton can live as a private citizen without constantly looking over his shoulder. It's more than most outlaws get. What will you do now? You ask Canton as you both leave the sheriff's office. He squints up at the rain-heavy sky. Not sure. Been a lawman so long, I don't know if I remember how to be anything else. Back at your cabin, you saddle your horse and strap on your few belongings. The bounty money remains hidden under the floor, your own private act of penance. Blood money should stay buried. A knock at your door reveals Canton, still damp from the rain. Heard you're riding out, he says. You nod. Nothing left for me here. Where you headed? North, maybe. Hear there's gold in Alaska. Canton's eyes light up with unexpected interest. Alaska, huh? Been thinking about that myself. You'd leave Oklahoma? You ask, surprised. Despite everything, Canton seemed rooted here. He shrugs. What's keeping me? No badge, no authority, and 2 dead Dunns whose brothers might still come looking for revenge. He pauses, considering. Alaska's about as far as a man can go without leaving American soil. It's cold, you warn, and lawless in its own way. Cold, I can handle. And lawless. Canton's smile is wry. I've got experience with that from both sides. You hadn't planned on travelling with company, especially not Frank Canton, but there's something appealing about having a former lawman along for the journey north, especially one as handy with a gun as Canton. I'm leaving today, you say. Rain or no rain? Give me an hour to pack, Canton replies. One last piece of business to settle first. As Canton walks away, you wonder what final loose end needs tying up. Then you remember the surviving Dunn brothers, Dal and George, were last seen riding west. But are they really gone? An hour later, you're mounted up and ready when Canton rides up on his tall bay gelding. He's travelling light, boat, one pack horse with supplies, his weapons, and whatever personal items he values enough to bring along. Business settled, you ask as you turn your horses north. As much as it can be, he answers cryptically. The rain has settled into a steady drizzle as you ride out of Porny. A few townspeople watch you go, but most stay inside, out of the weather. No one seems particularly sorry to see either of you leave. Too much death has followed in your wake. 3 days north, camped beside a small creek, Canton finally explains his business back in Porny. Went to see Dal and George's trail, he says, feeding sticks into your small fire. Make sure they really headed west. And did they? Canton nods. Tracked them about 10 miles. They're running, not hunting, heading for California like they always planned. You think they'll let it go? Their brothers' deaths? The fire pops and crackles, sending sparks into the night sky. Canton stares into the flames, considering. Hard to say. Dal never struck me as the vengeful type, more practical. George, he's the wild card, young, impressionable, could go either way. So we watch our backs, you conclude. We always watch our backs, Canton corrects. That's how men like us stay alive. Men like us. The phrase strikes you. When did you become the same kind of man as Frank Canton? Somewhere between your first bounty hunt and now, the line between who you were and who you've become has blurred beyond recognition. As you journey north, the landscape changes. Oklahoma's relatively flat terrain gives way to the rolling hills of Kansas, then the plains of Nebraska. You stick to less traveled routes, avoiding major settlements where Canton might be recognized. Not that anyone's actively hunting the former undersheriff, but old habits die hard. The weeks on the trail give you time to know Canton better. He speaks little of his past as Joe Horner, but occasionally, around the campfire at night, he'll share stories of his lawman days, the outlaws he's tracked, the gunfights he's survived, the hanging judge's court where he delivered his prisoners. Ever regret switching sides? You ask one night, going from outlaw to lawman? Canton considers the question longer than you expect. Not regret exactly, but sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd been caught back in Texas, served my time instead of running. You'd probably be dead, you point out. Texas prisons aren't known for their hospitality. Maybe. He pokes the fire with a stick. Or maybe I'd have served my sentence and still ended up a lawman, just without the lies. A lot of lawmen started out breaking the law, you observe. Seems like you need to understand both sides. Canton nods slowly. That's the truth of it. Best lawmen are the ones who can think like outlaws, know where they'll run, how they'll hide. In July, you reach Dakota territory. The land is vast and empty, stretching to horizons that seem impossibly distant. The weather turns mercurial, blistering heat one day, violent thunderstorms the next. Still, you push on, drawn northward by rumors of Alaskan gold and the promise of new beginnings. News travels even on the frontier. In a small trading post near the Canadian border, you hear that Dynamite Dick Clifton, one of the last members of the Wild Bunch, has been killed by deputy U.S. Marshals. The age of the outlaw gangs is ending, replaced by a new kind of ordered society. World's changing, Canton remarks as you ride away from the trading post. Closing in. Time was, a man could ride for weeks without seeing another soul. Now there's towns and settlements everywhere you look. He's right. The Wild West isn't so wild anymore. Railroads crisscross the land, telegraph lines connect distant cities. Law and order advance with each passing year, pushing the frontier further and further back until one day there will be no frontier left at all. That's why Alaska makes sense, you reply. Last real frontier we've got. Canton nods, his expression distant. For now, anyway. In late August, you reach the coast. The Pacific stretches before you, vast and forbidding. Ships come and go from the bustling port, many bound for Alaska and the gold fields of the Yukon. Ever been on a ship before? You ask Canton as you watch stevedores loading cargo onto a weathered steamer. Once, he admits, got seasick the whole damn time. You laugh, surprised by this admission of weakness from the stoic lawman. Maybe we should go by land, through Canada. Too late in the year, Canton shakes his head. Winter comes early up north. We'd get caught in the passes. So it's settled. You book passage on a steamer bound for Skagway, spending nearly half your remaining funds on tickets and supplies. The gold rush has driven prices sky high, with desperate men paying whatever it takes to chase the dream of instant wealth. The night before your ship sails, you and Canton share a bottle in a dockside tavern filled with prospectors, sailors and fortune seekers. The air is thick with tobacco smoke and wild stories of gold nuggets the size of a man's fist just waiting to be plucked from Alaskan streams. You really think there's gold up there? You ask, skeptical of the extravagant claims. Canton shrugs. Maybe. But that's not why we're going, is it? He's right, of course. You're not chasing gold. You're running from ghosts, from the men you've hunted, the blood you've spilled, the person you became while carrying that bounty hunter's license. What will you do up there, you ask, if not prospect? Heard they need lawmen. Canton says, US Marshals are short-handed with all the prospectors flooding in. Might see if my experience counts for anything. Even with your history? New territories, new rules. He refills his glass. Besides, Joe Horner died a long time ago. I'm Frank Canton now, have been for 20 years. You believe that, you ask? That a man can just become someone else? Canton meets your gaze steadily. I have to believe it. Otherwise, what was it all for? Morning brings a steel-grey sky and choppy seas. Your ship, the Portland, looks smaller and more weathered in daylight than it did in the harbour's evening shadows. Still, it's your passage to a new life, whatever that might be. As you wait to board, a commotion erupts further down the dock. Raised voices, then a flash of movement as someone breaks from the crowd, running toward the ships. Behind him, men in pursuit, one wearing a lawman's badge. "Stop that man," the lawman shouts. Wanted for murder, the fugitive races past you, desperation in his eyes. In his hand, a ticket for the Portland, your ship. He's trying to escape to Alaska, just like you and Canton, running from his past, just like you. Without thinking, your hand drops to your revolver. Old habits. The bounty hunter's instinct to capture, to bring in the wanted man. Beside you, Canton has already drawn his weapon, tracking the runner with practiced ease. But something stops you both, a moment of recognition, not of the man himself, but of what he represents. A mirror image from another time. The fugitive makes it to the gangplank and disappears into the ship. The pursuing lawman arrives seconds later, breathless and angry. "Did you see him?" the badge wearer demands. "Dark hair, blue shirt, running like hell?" You and Canton exchange a glance. 20 years ago, Canton was that running man. And you could have been him too, under different circumstances. "Didn't notice," Canton says, holstering his weapon. "Too many people on the docks today." The lawman curses, then hurries aboard to search the ship. You and Canton follow more slowly, your passage tickets in hand. "Why'd you let him go?" you ask quietly as you board. Canton doesn't answer immediately. When he does, his voice is thoughtful. "Maybe some men deserve a second chance, a fresh start. Even killers, you press?" "We've all killed," Canton responds simply. "Question is whether we learn from it, whether we become something better." As the Portland pulls away from the dock, you stand at the rail watching America recede. Behind you lies a continent of memories, blood and dust. Ahead, the unknown waters leading to Alaska, to new beginnings. Beside you, Frank Canton, once Joe Horner, bank robber and fugitive, then lawman and bounty hunter, now something undefined, stares north with anticipation in his eyes. "No wanted posters in Alaska with our faces on them," he remarks. "No Dunn brothers looking for revenge, no old scores to settle." Clean slate, you agree. But as the shoreline disappears into the mist, you wonder if any slate is ever truly clean, if the blood on your hands and the ghosts in your dreams will fade with distance and time, or if, like Canton, you'll spend the rest of your life balancing who you were against who you're trying to become. The sea stretches endlessly before the ship, grey and mysterious as the future itself. Somewhere ahead lies Alaska, the last frontier, with its promises and perils. You've left behind the dust of Oklahoma, the bodies of outlaws, the blood money under cabin floorboards. You've left behind the bounty hunter you were. But have you outrun yourself? Can anyone? As the Portland pitches in the growing swells, Canton grips the rail, his face already tinged with green. "Damn sea," he mutters. "Remind me why we didn't take the land route." You laugh, finding unexpected humour in seeing the legendary lawman laid low by simple waves. "Because we're in a hurry to become new men." "New men," he echoes, managing a grim smile. "Let's hope Alaska is far enough." The ship sails on, carrying you both toward whatever awaits in the frozen north. Behind you, the age of outlaws and bounty hunters fades like the distant shore, a chapter of American history closing forever. But some legends persist, some stories refuse to end, and in the years to come, the tale of Frank Canton, the outlaw who became a lawman, who became something else entirely, will be whispered in frontier saloons alongside stories of the Dalton Gang, the Wild Bunch, and the deadly Dunn brothers. After all, in the Wild West, a man wasn't defined by who he claimed to be, but by the stories told about him after he was gone, and those stories, like the frontier itself, have a way of growing wilder with each telling. The journey to Alaska tests your endurance in ways Oklahoma's gunfights never did. For 12 days, the Portland pitches and rolls through seas that grow increasingly hostile. Canton spends the first 3 days hanging over the rail, emptying his stomach into the Pacific, his legendary toughness no match for the ocean's relentless motion. "Should have shot me back in Porny," he groans during a particularly violent storm. "Would have been kinder." By the 4th day, he finds his sea legs, though he remains pale and subdued. The ship is crowded with prospectors, dreamers, and fugitives, men not unlike yourselves, seeking fortune or escape or both. The common areas buzz with wild tales of Alaskan gold, each story more extravagant than the last. "Nuggets big as your fist just lying in the creeks," one red-faced miner insists. "Saw it with my own eyes." You listen, skeptical but curious. These men believe in something, a chance, however slim, at transformation. Gold fever, they call it, the delirious conviction that the next shovelful of dirt will change everything. You believe any of it? You ask Canton as you share a smoke on deck, watching the northern horizon where the Alaskan coast still lies days away. He shrugs. Some. Where there's this many men willing to risk everything, there's usually something worth having. Maybe not what they think, but something. What are we looking for up there? The question has been bothering you since you decided to join Canton on this journey. Not gold, I'm guessing. Canton stares at the endless grey waves. Space, he finally says. Room to breathe without looking over my shoulder, without seeing ghosts. You understand that sentiment better than most. The ghosts of Oklahoma, the men you've hunted, the blood spilled in dusty streets and forgotten creek beds, haven't stayed behind. They've boarded the Portland with you, invisible passengers watching from the shadows. The ship rounds a headland, and suddenly Skagway appears, a ramshackle collection of tents and rough wooden buildings clinging to the shore beneath towering mountains. Behind the settlement, a narrow valley stretches away into fog-shrouded peaks, the infamous Chilcoot Pass, gateway to the Yukon goldfields. As the Portland eases into the harbour, you're struck by the chaos on shore. Hundreds, maybe thousands of men swarm the beach and crude docks. Vast piles of supplies and equipment create small mountains amid the human anthill. Dogs bark, men shout, steam whistles shriek. Jesus, Canton mutters beside you. It's worse than Dodge City during cattle season. You disembark into Bedlam. The muddy streets of Skagway teem with prospectors, conmen, merchants and thieves. Prices for everything from beans to blankets have been inflated to absurd levels by demand and distance. A sign outside a crude restaurant advertises eggs for $1 each. A week's wages back in the States. First order of business, Canton says, shouldering his pack, is finding some place to sleep that won't get us robbed or murdered. It takes hours of searching, but you eventually secure a corner in a massive tent that serves as a hotel of sorts. 50 canvas cots crammed together, each renting for the price of a decent room in San Francisco. Privacy is non-existent, security a joke. We'll need something better before winter, you observe, stashing your few belongings under the sagging cot. Temperatures already dropping at night. Canton nods, his experienced eyes surveying the tent's other occupants, a mix of exhausted prospectors, bright-eyed newcomers, and hard-faced men whose purposes in Alaska might not bear close examination. Tomorrow I'll check in with the law here, he says quietly. See what opportunities exist. You sure about that? You ask. After everything in Oklahoma? I'm not looking to pin on another badge, he clarifies. Just want to know where things stand, who's in charge, what kind of operation they're running. You understand his caution. Alaska in 1897 is the edge of American jurisdiction, a place where law exists more as a concept than a reality. Knowing the terrain, legal as well as physical, is essential for survival. The next morning, you explore Skagway while Canton makes his inquiries. The town is barely controlled chaos, a frontier boomtown exploding with the sudden influx of gold seekers. Saloons and gambling halls operate day and night. Merchants hawk outrageously priced supplies to greenhorns who don't know any better. Religious missionaries compete with prostitutes for attention on street corners. Quite a place, a voice observes beside you. You turn to find Canton, looking troubled. Makes the Oklahoma Territory seem civilized by comparison. What did you find out? He guides you away from the main street, speaking low. Law's a joke here. U.S. Marshal has jurisdiction but no manpower. Local peacekeepers are on the take. Real power belongs to a fella named Jefferson Smith, calls himself Soapy, runs everything from gambling to protection rackets. Sounds familiar, you remark. Every frontier has its version. Difference is, back in Oklahoma, there were enough legitimate lawmen to keep things balanced. Here, Canton shakes his head. Smith's got this place locked down tight, even controls the mail and telegraph. That evening, you witness Soapy Smith in action. The self-proclaimed King of Skagway holds court in the largest saloon, a tall man with a neat goatee and cold, calculating eyes. His gang of supporters, the Soap Gang, keeps order according to their boss's whims. You watch a prospector beaten bloody for questioning the fairness of a card game, then dragged away when he can no longer stand. No one intervenes. No one even seems surprised. "We should move on," Canton says after witnessing the beating. "Dawson City's further into the interior, but it's got actual law. Canadian Mounties don't mess around. Crossing the pass this late in the year is risky," you point out. "Winter's coming fast." Canton surveys the saloon, his eyes lingering on Soapy Smith. "Staying here might be riskier." The decision is made for you 3 days later. Canton returns to your tent hotel with news that chills you despite the warm September afternoon. "Saw George Dunn on Front Street," he says without preamble. "He's here." The name hits like a physical blow. "You sure? It was him. Older. Bearded now. But it was him. He didn't see me." Your mind races. George Dunn, youngest of the brothers, in Skagway. It can't be coincidence. The Dunns had talked about California, not Alaska. "He's hunting us," you conclude. Canton nods grimly. "Has to be. Question is he alone, or did Dal come too?" You pack quickly, gathering only essentials. The Chilcoot Pass is already dangerous this late in the season, but staying in Skagway with a vengeful Dunn on your trail is certain death. "We leave at dawn," Canton decides. "First boat up Lynn Canal to Dyer, then straight to the trailhead." That night, you sleep fitfully, waking at every sound, hand never far from your revolver. The ghosts you fled in Oklahoma have followed you to Alaska, taking corporeal form. The past, it seems, isn't so easily outrun. Dawn brings fog rolling off the water, shrouding Skagway in ghostly white. Perfect cover for your departure, but also perfect ambush weather. You move cautiously through the sleeping town, alert for any sign of George Dunn. The small steamer to Dyer leaves with the morning tide, carrying a dozen passengers, mostly prospectors headed for the pass with dreams of Yukon gold. You and Canton stand at the stern, watching Skagway disappear into the fog, wondering if George Dunn is watching the boat from shore, realizing his quarry has slipped away. "Think he recognized you?" you ask Canton. "Don't know. Been a few years. I've changed." "Not that much," you observe. The former undersheriff still carries himself with unmistakable authority, still watches everyone and everything with lawman's eyes. The journey to Dyer takes barely 2 hours. Unlike Skagway, this settlement is clearly temporary, a launching point for the Chilcoot rather than a destination itself. Tents far outnumber permanent structures. The beach is littered with mountains of supplies as prospectors sort and repack their goods for the grueling climb ahead. Canadian Mounties won't let anyone cross without a year's worth of supplies, Canton explains as you survey the scene. Ton of food and equipment per man. Literally a ton, 2,000 pounds. We travelling that heavy? You can't imagine hauling so much over a mountain pass. Canton shakes his head. "We're not prospectors. We're travelling light and fast. Hunting cabin up near Tagish Lake if we can make it before the snow. Mountie I knew back in Wyoming told me about it. Said the owner died last spring. Place is abandoned." It's a gamble, but a calculated one. Unlike the gold-crazed masses, you're not heading to the Klondike itself, but to the less-travelled regions just over the pass, and you're moving now ahead of the heavy snows that will close the routes entirely by November. The Chilcoot Trail begins innocuously enough, a muddy path winding through scrubby forest alongside a rushing creek. But within miles, the true nature of the journey becomes clear. The trail steepens dramatically, becoming a brutal ascent up bare rock and scree. Around you, prospectors struggle under impossible loads, many making multiple trips to transport their ton of supplies. You and Canton push forward, carrying only what you need to survive. Food, ammunition, basic tools. The weather holds for 3 days, allowing steady progress. On the 4th morning, you reach the summit, the literal border between American and Canadian territory, marked by a tattered flag and a small detachment of Mounties checking paperwork and supplies. "Purpose in Canada?" a red-coated officer asks, studying your minimal packs with suspicion. "Hunting and trapping," Canton answers smoothly. "Got a cabin near Tagish." The Mountie frowns. "Most men are heading to the gold fields." "Most men are fools," Canton replies, with just enough humour to avoid offence. "After a brief inspection of your supplies, deemed barely adequate by the Mountie standards, you're allowed to pass." The Canadian side of the Chilcoot descends toward a chain of lakes, Lindeman, Bennett, Tagish, that form the headwaters of the Yukon River. The weather turns as you begin the descent. Snow flurries dance around you, driven by an Arctic wind that cuts through clothing like a knife. The temperature plummets as afternoon fades toward evening. "Need shelter," Canton shouts over the rising gale. "Storm's coming fast." You take refuge in a crude shelter built by previous travellers, little more than a three-sided lean-to of logs and branches, but enough to block the worst of the wind. As darkness falls, the snow intensifies, blanketing the world in white silence. If George Dunn is following, this'll slow him down too, you observe, feeding small branches into your meagre fire. Canton nods, his face grim in the flickering light, unless he was already on the trail ahead of us. The possibility hangs between you like the smoke from your fire. If Dunn somehow anticipated your escape route, he could be waiting ahead, perhaps at the very cabin you're aiming for. "We'll take turns watching tonight," you decide, checking your revolver by feel. The familiar weight is reassuring in this alien landscape of snow and darkness. Morning brings clearing skies and a transformed world. Everything, trees, rocks, the trail itself, lies buried under 6 inches of fresh snow, beautiful but treacherous. The descent becomes a slow, slippery ordeal, each step carrying the risk of a twisted ankle or worse. It takes 3 more days to reach Lake Bennett, where a small settlement has sprung up around a sawmill. Here, prospectors who've conquered the Chilcoot pause to build boats for the final leg of their journey to the Klondike. The lakefront buzzes with activity despite the late season. Men working frantically to finish their vessels before ice closes the water route. You and Canton rest here for a day, gathering information and supplies. The cabin you're seeking lies 2 days' journey east of the main route, accessible by a trapper's trail that branches off near the northern end of Tagish Lake. "Not many heading that way," a grizzled boat builder tells you when asked about the trail. "Nothing there but wilderness, no gold." "That's what we're counting on," Canton replies. You leave Bennett the next morning, following the eastern shore of the lake. The established trail is well travelled enough to be clear despite the recent snow. Other travellers, mostly late-season prospectors rushing to beat winter, pass you heading north. None show any particular interest in you and Canton, for which you're grateful. 2 days later, you reach the junction where your path diverges from the main trail. The trapper's route is barely visible, a faint depression through the forest, already filling with fresh snow from flurries that come and go throughout the day. "Not much traffic this way?" you observe, studying the unmarked snow. "Good," Canton says. "Less chance of running into Dunn by accident." You make camp early, gathering extra firewood for what promises to be a cold night. The temperature has been dropping steadily as October advances. Ice already forms along the lake edges each night, melting reluctantly under the brief daylight. "How much further to the cabin?" you ask as you share coffee and jerky beside the fire. "Day and a half, if the directions are good," Canton replies, studying a crude map drawn for him by the Wyoming Mountie. "Should reach Tagish Lake by midday tomorrow, then follow the shore east to a creek. Cabins upstream about 2 miles. Sleep comes quickly after the long day's trek, but sometime in the darkest hours, you jerk awake, heart racing. Something pulled you from sleep, a sound, a sense of wrongness. Beside you, Canton is already alert, rifle in hand. "What is it?" you whisper. He shakes his head, listening intently. For long minutes, nothing disturbs the night except the soft sigh of wind through pine branches. Then, faintly, the snap of a twig breaking under weight. Something or someone is moving in the forest nearby. Canton touches your arm, points to the right, then to himself, then left. The message is clear. Circle in opposite directions. Flank whatever's out there. You nod, drawing your revolver as you slip into the darkness beyond the dying fire's glow. The forest is a maze of black tree trunks against slightly less black snow. You move carefully, placing each foot to avoid twigs or frozen leaves that might betray your position. The cold air burns your lungs, but you breathe shallowly, minimizing sound. Another twig snaps, closer now. You freeze, straining your eyes against the darkness. A shadow moves between trees, roughly man-shaped, too large for a wolf, too deliberate for a deer. You raise your revolver, tracking the figure's progress. The blast of a rifle shatters the night. The muzzle flash briefly illuminates Canton's grim face and a larger shape that crumples to the ground with a very human cry of pain. You rush forward as Canton approaches the fallen figure, rifle still trained on the man writhing in the bloodstained snow. "Got him in the leg," Canton says tersely. "Check if he's armed." You kneel beside the wounded man, quickly locating and removing a revolver from his holster. Only then, in the faint starlight filtering through the trees, do you recognize the face contorted with pain. "It's not Dunn," you tell Canton. "Never seen him before." The stranger glares up at you, clutching his bleeding thigh. "Bastards shot me," he gasps. "I ain't done nothing to you." "You were sneaking around our camp in the middle of the night," Canton observes coldly. "Not the behavior of an innocent man. Was just looking for food," the man insists. "Been lost 3 days, separated from my partners on the trail." His clothes support the story, tattered, filthy, showing signs of hard travel and exposure. Still, caution keeps your guard up. The Yukon trail is full of desperate men, and desperation breeds both lies and violence. "We'll treat your wound," you decide. "Then we'll figure out what to do with you in the morning." By firelight, you and Canton clean and bandage the stranger's leg. The bullet passed through cleanly, damaging muscle but missing bone and major blood vessels. With proper care, he'll recover, though walking any distance will be painful for weeks. "Name's Harris," the man says once the worst of the pain subsides. "William Harris. From Seattle, originally." "What are you doing off the main trail?" Canton asks, still suspicious. Harris sighs. "Like I said, got separated from my partners. Was heading to the Klondike, but took a wrong turn somewhere after Bennett. Been wandering 3 days trying to find the trail again." His story is plausible. The route through the lakes is confusing, especially for newcomers, and especially under snow. Men have died within yards of the main trail, lost in whiteout conditions, or simply taking a wrong turn. "We're not heading to the Klondike," you tell him. "Can't take you there." "Don't care where you're going," Harris replies wearily. "Just don't leave me out here to die." The night passes tensely, with you and Canton taking turns watching both the wounded Harris and the surrounding forest. By morning, it's clear the man poses little threat. His wound, while not life-threatening, has left him feverish and weak. "We can't leave him," you tell Canton privately as you break camp. "He won't survive on his own." Canton's face is impassive. Taking him with us is a risk, slows us down, uses supplies we can't spare. "We shot him," you remind Canton. "Accident or not, that makes him our responsibility." Something flickers in Canton's eyes. Perhaps respect, perhaps just resignation. Fine. But he rides the pack horse, and we keep his gun. And so your party gains a third member as you continue toward Tagish Lake. Harris, secured on the back of your pack horse, drifts in and out of consciousness as fever from his wound takes hold. You make slower progress than planned, forced to stop early to treat Harris and ensure he doesn't fall from the horse. Should reach the cabin tomorrow, Canton says that evening, studying his map by firelight, assuming it's where it's supposed to be and assuming it's still standing. And assuming George Dunn isn't waiting for us there, you add quietly, so Harris can't hear. Canton meets your gaze across the fire. Been thinking about that. If Dunn is hunting us, why haven't we seen sign of him on our trail? He wasn't far behind us in Skagway. It's a good question. If vengeance drove George Dunn to Alaska, he should have been dogging your steps from the beginning. Instead, there's been no sign of pursuit. Maybe he lost our trail, you suggest, or took a different route over the mountains. Maybe, Canton agrees, but he doesn't sound convinced. Or maybe he's already where we're going, waiting. The possibility adds urgency to your journey. The next morning, despite Harris's deteriorating condition, you push harder, determined to reach the cabin before nightfall. The terrain grows increasingly difficult, the trapper's trail fading to nothing in places, forcing you to navigate by Canton's crude map and natural landmarks. Midday brings you to the eastern shore of Tagish Lake, its waters slate grey under a low, threatening sky. Wind whips across the open expanse, carrying the promise of snow. You follow the shoreline north, searching for the creek that will lead to your destination. There! Canton points around mid-afternoon. A small stream empties into the lake, partially frozen even in the relative warmth of daylight. This should be it. The creek leads away from the lake into dense forest. You follow its winding course upstream, Canton in the lead, you bringing up the rear with Harris on the pack horse between you. The wounded man has stopped complaining, a sign of his worsening condition. The cabin appears suddenly around a bend in the creek, a solid structure of squared logs with a stone chimney, nestled in a small clearing. Smoke rises from that chimney, thin but unmistakable against the darkening sky. Someone is already there. Canton raises his hand, halting your small party within the tree line out of sight from the cabin's windows. "Stay here with Harris," he whispers. "I'll scout." He disappears into the underbrush, circling to approach the cabin from another angle. You wait, tense and alert, one hand on your revolver, the other steadying Harris, who sways dangerously on the horse's back. 10 minutes pass. 15. The light fades as evening approaches. Finally, Canton reappears, his expression unreadable. "Well?" you ask. "Done?" Canton shakes his head. "Not done. A woman, alone, far as I can tell." "A woman?" You can't hide your surprise. Female prospectors exist, but they're rare, especially this far from established routes. "Native woman," Canton clarifies. "Probably Tagish or Tlingit. Looks like she's been living in the cabin since the trapper died." You consider this unexpected development. What do we do? Canton stares at the cabin, thinking. We approach openly. No sneaking. Show we're not a threat. He glances at Harris, now barely conscious. And we've got a wounded man who needs shelter. Might help our case. The decision made, you lead the pack horse into the clearing, approaching the cabin with deliberate, unthreatening movements. Canton walks ahead, rifle pointed at the ground, hands visible. The cabin door opens before you're halfway across the clearing. A woman appears, holding a rifle with the confidence of someone who knows how to use it. She's middle-aged, dressed in a mixture of native and European clothing. Her dark eyes assess your party with cautious intelligence. "Stop there!" she calls in accented but clear English. "What do you want?" "Shelter," Canton responds simply. "We have a wounded man, and winter's coming." She studies you for a long moment, her gaze lingering on Harris slumped over the horse. Finally, she lowers her rifle slightly. Come closer, slowly. You advance until you stand before the cabin steps. Up close, you can see the woman's face bears the weathered marks of a hard life on the frontier. "I am Casca," she says. "This was my husband's cabin. He died last spring." "The trapper," Canton realizes. "You're his widow." She nods. "You know of him?" "A Mountie told me about this place, said it might be abandoned." Canton gestures to Harris. "Our friend needs help. We can pay." Casca's eyes narrow. "I don't need money, but I need many things before winter. Ammunition, coffee, medicine." She looks pointedly at Harris. "Your friend may die without proper care. We'll share what we have," you offer, "and help with hunting, repairs, whatever's needed." She considers this for a moment, then steps aside from the doorway. "Bring him in, but understand, this is my home. You are guests only." As you help Harris from the horse and into the cabin's unexpected warmth, you realize you've found something rare in this harsh land. Not just shelter, but perhaps an ally. Someone with knowledge of the country. Someone already established. Someone who might help you and Canton truly disappear from the ghosts of Oklahoma, including George Dunn, wherever he might be. The cabin's interior is simple but well kept. A stone fireplace dominates one wall, its crackling flames pushing back the gathering evening chill. Furs and woven mats cover the packed earth floor. Dried herbs and meat hang from the ceiling beams. It smells of wood smoke, pine, and unfamiliar cooking spices. "Put him there," Casca directs, pointing to a pallet near the fire. "I will look at his wound." As you settle Harris onto the pallet, Canton brings in your minimal supplies. Outside, the first flakes of new snow begin to fall, driven by a wind that moans through the surrounding pines like a living thing. You've reached shelter just in time. Winter has arrived in earnest, sealing you into this unexpected sanctuary with a wounded stranger and a widow who regards you with cautious tolerance. And somewhere out there, perhaps, George Dunn still searches for the men who killed his brothers, but for now at least, you're safe. The ghosts can't follow through the blizzard that's building outside. At least that's what you tell yourself as darkness falls over the Yukon wilderness. Winter descends on the Yukon with brutal finality. For 3 days after your arrival at Casca's cabin, snow falls continuously, piling in drifts taller than a man. The temperature plummets until spit freezes before it hits the ground. The creek beside the cabin vanishes beneath ice thick enough to walk on. The world contracts to the cabin's 4 walls, the glow of the fire, and the small routines that fill each day. Harris's condition improves slowly under Casca's care. She treats his wound with poultices of crushed herbs and pine resin that smell terrible but draw out the infection. His fever breaks after 5 days, and gradually colour returns to his face. "Lucky," she pronounces one morning, checking his bandages. "Bullet clean through, no bone." Canton spends his days chopping firewood, hunting when the weather permits, and repairing weak spots in the cabin's construction. You help where needed, learning from both Canton and Casca how to survive in this harsh environment. It's a different kind of education than tracking outlaws across Oklahoma territory, but no less essential. Casca proves to be a woman of few words but deep knowledge. Born to a Tagish mother and Tlingit father, she navigates between native traditions and the ways of white settlers with practiced ease. Her late husband, a French-Canadian trapper named Beaumont, taught her English and how to deal with the outside world. In return, she showed him how to survive in a land that kills the unprepared. My people have lived here since before time, she tells you one evening as she teaches you to repair snowshoes. We know the patterns, when to gather, when to hunt, when to be still. White men come rushing, always rushing. Many die because they do not listen to the land. The cabin settles into a rhythm as November yields to December. Outside, daylight shrinks to a brief dim glow at midday. Inside, the four of you form an unlikely community. Harris, once recovered enough to move around, proves surprisingly useful, a former carpenter with skills perfectly suited to cabin improvements. "Never thought I'd end up here," he confesses one night as you share coffee by the fire. "Came north for gold like every other fool. Now I'm just grateful to be alive." "What will you do when spring comes?" you ask. He shrugs. "Don't know. Can't work a gold claim with this leg. Might try to reach Dawson, find carpentry work. Hear they're building a proper town there." Canton rarely speaks of the future. He throws himself into learning everything Casca can teach, tracking in snow, reading weather from cloud patterns, preserving meat to last the winter. When not working, he sits by the fire carving intricate figures from wood with surprising artistry. Bears, wolves, eagles, the animals of his new world taking shape beneath his knife. "Didn't know you were an artist," you remark, watching him work on a delicate salmon. "Neither did I," he responds with a slight smile. "Never had time for it before. Christmas comes and goes, marked only by a special meal of moose meat and dried berries that Casca prepares. The new year arrives during a blizzard so fierce that stepping outside means certain death. You celebrate by staying alive, gathered around the fire, listening to the wind howl like hungry wolves beyond the walls. January brings the deep cold, temperatures that freeze unprotected flesh in minutes. The simple act of gathering firewood becomes a dangerous expedition requiring careful preparation. Inside the cabin, frost forms in corners despite the constant fire. At night, everyone sleeps close to the hearth, wrapped in layers of furs and blankets. It's during one such night in late January that the quiet is broken by an unexpected sound, the distant howl of sled dogs. You wake instantly, hand reaching for the revolver you keep nearby even now. Across the cabin, Canton is already up, rifle in hand, peering through the single window's frost-rimed glass. "Someone's coming," he says unnecessarily. "Dog team, single sled from what I can make out." Casca joins him at the window. "Might be mail carrier. They come through sometimes, even in winter." "Or might be someone else," Canton says, his meaning clear. George Dunn remains an unspoken concern, a shadow at the edges of your new life. The sled appears at the edge of the clearing just as grey dawn breaks. A single figure drives a team of 6 dogs, moving with the practiced skill of someone who knows the country. Not a desperate man on a vengeance mission, but a professional traveller. "Mail carrier," Casca confirms, relaxing slightly. "I know this man. Jacob Whitney, half Tlingit, half American, carries messages between settlements." Even so, you and Canton remain cautious as the sled approaches. Old habits die hard. Whitney brings his team to a halt outside the cabin, speaking soft commands in a mixture of English and native words. The dogs settle immediately into the snow, trained to rest whenever the opportunity presents itself. Whitney himself is a compact man bundled in furs, his face weathered by years of exposure to the elements. Only when he pushes back his hood can you see he's younger than his bearing suggests, perhaps 30, with intelligent eyes that miss nothing. "Casca," he greets, stomping snow from his boots before entering. "Didn't expect to find you with company." "These men arrived before the deep snow," she explains. "One was wounded. They stay for winter." Whitney nods, accepting this with the frontier's pragmatic attitude toward unusual situations. He carries a small pouch of mail, mostly official communications between settlements, but occasionally personal letters that find their way along the wilderness routes through sheer determination. "Nothing for you," he tells Casca, "but I bring news, and coffee if you have some to spare." Over steaming cups, Whitney shares what information he carries from the outside world. The gold rush continues despite winter's grip, with thousands still pouring into Dawson City and the Klondike. Skagway remains under Soapy Smith's control, though rumours suggest federal authorities may finally intervene. "And there's been trouble on the pass," Whitney adds. 3 men found frozen 2 weeks back. Got caught in a storm, seems like. "Anyone know who they were?" Canton asks, his voice carefully neutral. Whitney shrugs. "One had papers, George something, Dunn, I think. Other 2 were strangers to these parts." The name falls like a stone into still water. George Dunn, dead on the Chilcoot. The last of the brothers who'd sworn vengeance against Frank Canton. "Dunn?" Canton repeats softly. "You're certain?" "That's what the Mounties said." Whitney studies Canton with sudden interest. "You knew him?" "Crossed paths," Canton says vaguely, "back in the States." The conversation moves on, but later, when Whitney has departed to continue his rounds, you and Canton sit by the fire processing this unexpected news. "So that's it," you say finally. "George Dunn never made it over the pass." Canton stares into the flames. "He wasn't hunting us at all. Just another gold seeker who took the same route north." Coincidence, you wonder. Seems hard to believe. Or maybe Canton's expression is unreadable, or maybe he was following us and the mountain took care of him before he found us. Either way, the threat that's hung over you since Skagway is gone. The last Dunn brother lies buried in a frozen grave on the Chilcoot Pass, another victim of the merciless northern wilderness. The vendetta that began in the dust of Oklahoma Territory has ended in the snow of Alaska. Does it change anything, you ask, for your plans? Canton considers this. "Don't know that I had plans beyond survival, getting through winter. After that," he shrugs. "The world's different up here, simpler in some ways, harder in others. But no one looking to hang Joe Horner, you observe." A ghost of a smile touches his lips. "There's that." February brings deeper cold, but more frequent clear days. The northern lights dance across the night sky in ribbons of green and purple so vivid they seem close enough to touch. During daylight, which grows longer with each passing week, you venture further from the cabin, learning the surrounding territory, setting traps for small game, becoming part of this land in ways you never connected with Oklahoma. Harris proves more resilient than expected. By March, he's walking with only a slight limp, eager to make himself useful. He repairs the cabin's roof, builds proper shelves and a table, constructs snowshoes that even Casca admits are well made. "Man could make a good living in Dawson," she observes, watching him work. "They need builders there." Canton, too, has found unexpected purpose. His wood carvings grow more elaborate and beautiful. Casca suggests he might trade them to coastal tribes who value such artistry. For the first time since you've known him, he speaks of the future with something approaching enthusiasm. "Thinking I might try for a marshal's position in Dawson come spring," he tells you one day while you're checking traps together. "Heard they're looking for experienced men." "Back to law work?" you ask, surprised. "Even after everything?" He nods. "It's what I know, what I'm good at. And up here, no one cares who I was before, only matters what I can do now." "What about your past catching up again?" Canton surveys the vast white landscape stretching to distant mountains. "Let it try to find me here." April brings the first real thaw. The creek ice cracks with sounds like gunshots. Snow recedes from south-facing slopes, revealing glimpses of brown earth. Birds return from their winter migrations, filling the air with calls not heard for months. With spring comes decisions about the future. Harris is determined to reach Dawson City when the trail's clear. Canton seems likely to follow the same path, drawn by the possibility of pinning on a badge again in a place where Frank Canton's reputation, good or bad, been. What about you? Canton asks one evening as plans take shape. Got a direction in mind? You've been pondering this question for weeks. The bounty hunter life holds no appeal anymore. Neither does chasing gold like the thousands still streaming north despite disappointing reports from the Klondike. Might stay, you say, surprising yourself with the decision even as you speak it. Help Casca with the trapping. Learn the country better. Canton nods, accepting this without judgment. Good land here, far from crowds, far from troubles. Casca, overhearing, gives you a measuring look. Trapping is hard work, lonely work, not for men who need excitement. Had enough excitement, you tell her, looking for something quieter. She seems satisfied with this answer. Later, she shows you how to repair a damaged trap with materials at hand. Another small piece of knowledge passed from someone who truly understands this unforgiving land. May brings genuine warmth and the final preparations for departure. The trail to Lake Bennett is clear enough for travel, and from there, Harris and Canton can catch transport to Dawson City. You help them pack, provision, plan their route using knowledge gained over the winter. The night before they leave, you sit late around the fire, sharing the last of a whiskey bottle Harris had somehow kept intact through all his travels. Strange how things work out, Harris muses, staring into his cup. Almost died on that trail. Now I'm heading to Dawson to build houses for rich prospectors. Life takes unexpected turns, Canton agrees, especially up here. What about you? You ask him. Still set on marshal work? He nods. Already exchanged letters with the chief constable in Dawson. They're interested in my experience. A faint smile touches his lips. Didn't mention which side of the law that experience came from. Joe Horner stays buried, you observe. Joe Horner died in Texas, Canton corrects. Long before Alaska, the man heading to Dawson is just Frank Canton, nobody special. But there's something in his tone that suggests he doesn't quite believe this himself. Canton may have outrun his past, but he carries it within him, shaped by it in ways that can never be fully escaped, just as you carry the memory of every man you hunted, every bounty collected, every life altered or ended by your actions in Oklahoma. Morning comes clear and cool. Harris and Canton make final preparations for the journey to Bennett and beyond. You help load the sled Casca has traded for, harnessing the two dogs that will help pull their supplies. Should reach Bennett by nightfall if you push hard, you advise, checking the bindings one last time. We'll make it, Canton assures you. He seems lighter somehow, unburdened by the weight of secrets and vendettas that dogged him in the south. The moment of parting comes without ceremony. Harris shakes your hand firmly, genuine gratitude in his eyes. Wouldn't be alive without you, he says simply. Despite you shooting me first, you laugh, acknowledging the strange path that brought you all together. Build something that lasts in Dawson. Count on it, he promises. Canton's farewell is more reserved, befitting the complex history between you. You've been enemies, allies, reluctant partners, and finally something approaching friends. Take care of yourself, he says, offering his hand. This country doesn't forgive mistakes. I've got a good teacher, you reply, glancing toward Casca, who watches from the cabin door. Canton nods. Better than most. He hesitates, then adds, if you ever make it to Dawson, I'll find the marshal's office. You complete the thought. With final waves they depart, following the creek down toward Tagish Lake. You watch until they disappear among the trees, 2 more men seeking reinvention in the vastness of the north. Beside you, Casca stands in comfortable silence. Finally, she says, they will be fine. Your friend Canton, he understands what matters here. And what's that, you ask? Knowing when to fight and when to bend, she answers, like the willows in storm. You help her inside to prepare for the day's work. There are traps to check, wood to split, endless tasks that fill frontier life. But now these tasks feel purposeful rather than desperate. Not just survival, but building something that might last. That night, alone, except for Casca's quiet presence across the cabin, you find yourself reflecting on the strange journey that brought you here. From dusty Oklahoma streets to this isolated cabin in the Yukon wilderness. From hunting human beings for money to learning how to live in harmony with one of the world's harshest environments. Frank Canton's path continues elsewhere, shaped by choices both deliberate and accidental. The Dunn brothers lie in graves scattered across 2 territories. Their vendetta ended not by justice, but by circumstance. And you, the bounty hunter who walked away, have found an unexpected peace in a place most would consider unbearably challenging. Outside, the northern lights dance across the spring sky, rippling curtains of colour that seem to contain all the mysteries of this vast land. Inside, the fire crackles softly, casting warm shadows that invite contemplation. Your bed of furs and blankets beckons, promising rest after a day of honest work. Perhaps reinvention is possible after all, you think, as drowsiness begins to overtake you. Not by outrunning the past or burying it like Frank Canton tried to do, but by building something new alongside it, accepting what came before while choosing what comes next. As sleep approaches, you recall something Casca said during the depths of winter. The land remembers everything, but judges nothing. It simply is. We can learn from this. The fire settles into embers. Outside, an owl calls once, then falls silent. Your breathing slows, matching the rhythm of the quiet cabin, the peaceful night, the turning earth. And as you drift towards sleep, warm and safe in this place so far from where your story began, you understand that the greatest bounty you ever found wasn't attached to a wanted poster or paid in blood money. It was this, the chance to begin again, the opportunity to choose a different path. The simple gift of tomorrow, unmarked by yesterday's mistakes. Your eyes grow heavy, your thoughts gentler, more distant. The tensions of the day release one by one like stars fading at dawn. And finally, sleep claims you fully, deep and restful in this cabin that has become, against all odds, something like home.